Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Damn it. If the grandmother had heard such a dirty expression from the mouth of her pupil, she would have deprived her of sweets for a week and made her wash her mouth out with soap. But since Grandma was sound asleep at the late hour of 0 o'clock, Camille went unpunished, finally having stopped pacing her room. Exactly the beast of the cage called the garden. The young girl plumped down on the bed, complaining about the creaking, shell netted from the mushroom in a pile of plush John, and snuggled into his worn chocolate-colored fur. Silently she cried. How? But how could she have been so stupid? To fall so low? It wasn't her brain that obligingly suggested the flu, though. There's still time before the immediate fall, namely 21 o'clock 30 minutes. The exact time was suggested to her by the dial of the alarm clock, at which she cast a tear-stained glance. It was in that time frame that she was to report to the abominable. Impossible without a heart of the scoundrels. 2. It all happened 10 days ago. Camille was in the school library. She had just returned the books she had read and summoned the help of an elderly librarian who had been plagued by sciatica from the rainy weather. Samara had them shelved. Petty. There was a mocking voice over her shoulder and a school drill. Way rolled. Cooley turned around. Startled. Because of the height difference, she gave the owner of the voice with her nose somewhere in his chest. At armpit level. No, she said, abruptly, and through clenched teeth, she dropped her gaze. She looked bold and contemptuous. Stephen is the bully of the whole school, a bully and just the embodiment of all male vices. The distance between the boxes left no room for maneuvering. But Georgia, still out of the back, turned around, involuntarily slid sideways on his thigh, and standing on tiptoe, reached up, and just a little more and the book on the lives of the greatest ancient Greek philosophers would be in place. She decided that she would just ignore Stephen, not give him that pleasure. Grandmother, by the way, even in the mind forbade to swear, but granddaughter in the mind to do it to herself aloud. Because it was so, because life turned out to be so, that sometimes she felt emotion, and it was impossible to do anything about it. Camille repeated to herself that she did not care that he continued to stand. Behind him, he must be squinting mockingly, blue eyes so piercing it seemed he could see right through you. A rustling sound was heard. Stephen apparently scratched the back of his blonde head. What unseemly habit! And then he suddenly intercepted the book from her, yanked it out of her hand, and slid it back onto the shelf himself. I didn't ask for it. Before she could finish, she choked on air, because he immediately grasped her shoulders firmly and turned her around to face him, literally typing her back into the shelf. I need to talk to you. I have nothing to talk about. Unexpectedly for herself, menacingly raised her voice, and immediately remembered where she was, went to a whisper, leave me alone. That's how it is. After all you've done, it's no different than teasing. He lowered his voice too. By the way, you've caused me so much damage. You're a firing squad. Calling everyone up to the director. Losses. Who could even come up with trading answers for tests? Businessman, Stephen snorted. You're a dishonest man. You're a liar. You tell me you're not a gentleman. His hand suddenly moved from the girl's round shoulder to her thin, tall neck. His fingers ran along the edge of the snow-white legs, the collar, the decorated dress, as if to feel and outline the contour of the collarbone. Is that what it is about you? You seem to dress like a grandmother and act like one. What are you doing? The girl whispered. Her voice was quiet, barely audible. No longer out of habit of observing the rules of the library, but out of a strange numbness that spread through her body from the places Stephen touched. He grinned, but with only his lips. His eyes were cold. Nothing to do. He pulled away, took a step to the side. And so there was finally some distance between them, an obsession that had subsided. Nothing to do. Camille gasped for air. Stephen stood with his hands in the pockets of his jeans, on top of a t-shirt with some soccer club insignia and a black jacket. Dry, clearly 2 sizes too big. Despite his tall height of almost 190 centimeters, The guy was not very broad in the shoulders and was terribly self-conscious about it, but he kept it a secret, of course. Stephen was the storm of the school, elusive and yet a known bully in the neighborhood, but on his half. He was also a repeat offender with a history of being held back in 3rd, 6th, and 8th grades. It was hard to know what was the ugly truth about him and what was a scary rumor. But in any case, it would be hard to find a person more opposite in qualities and peculiarities noticeable at first sight in comparison with Sophia. And she, like him this spring, turned 18 years old at the very beginning of the season, when the first drop just appeared from the roof. Except that while Stephen looked all of 20, Camille was considerably younger than her age. The principal, the vice principal, handed out in the cafeteria, and some other people cringed at that. They loved to compare them. That's how unlike a schoolgirl is to her peers. Camille's grandmother, Emily, who for 10 years had also been her guardian after the death of her parents, who died in a car accident, and her only relative in the world, took care of her. Two people from very different eras inhabited the 3-bedroom Stalin apartment. In her working past, Emily taught history and literature. For almost 30 years, she had lived in the far north. Her pension was decent. She had enough to live on, as they call it. However, an outside observer could decide that the life of the grandmother and her granddaughter was peculiar, if not to say very strange. Camille received an exceptionally strict upbringing at home. Grandmother had no doubt that the modern world cannot trust a child. Overmullet, young, stupid creature will destroy the soul, morality, cripple, future. Emily herself kept to herself. She socialized only with a few worthy, in her opinion, people around her age. And if there was someone who had the audacity to say that she treated the child wrongly, that person received such an angry, logically constructed, and reasoned response that he himself was to blame, and in general shame on his head. And in time, the neighbors got used to it. After all, every family has its own rules. Everyone knows that. And since Emily's pupil was clean, clothed, and did not freeze, was always fed in winter, well behaved. Since Emily herself had a reputation for impeccability. For the last 50 years, then with time everyone calmed down, and even envied a little began to envy. After all, Emily had raised a granddaughter. So she's a golden girl. Not at all like the modern kids of the family unit. Just a little lady, not a girl. Until 5th grade. Camille was homeschooled, and then she went to school and became a white crow. Teachers, though, praised her diligence and gave her A's. One day, I only got a C for my essay on how I spent my summer. In it, a 6th grader described how she had spent the whole summer reading works on world economics and the history of capitalism. The teacher said that it was very informative, but I would like to know about personal, so to speak, life, impressions, and adventures. Were there only books all summer? Camille then boldly replied that her grandmother has an Alex Schwartz acquaintance. He has an anniversary. He is 90 years old, and he just wrote those very books on the history of capitalism. That's why it was necessary to read them all. And then, based on the results, so to speak, to write a poem and give it to the Jubilee. Everything else is in the background of such an important matter. Selfishness and vanity. If Camille had said this one-on-one, the teacher might not have been angry. But the confrontation happened in front of the whole class. The class burst into laughter, and the teacher gave the girl a C. That C made the girl sick. She got so hysterical, she ended up fainting. We had to call an ambulance. Naturally, the teacher replaced it with a B out of harm's way. But Camille spent a long time pining and telling everyone that she was a loser, since her essays had only gotten a measly C. But it wasn't just the specifics of her studies that made her stand out. She dressed very originally. Naturally, her grandmother was in charge of her closet. It consisted of good new things, except that they were made according to the fashion of the 30s of the last century, and that they were clothes are not the most fashionable dressy styles in that era. Shoes were also selected the most modest. Flat shoes were not a brand. Classmates grew up, became teenagers, young girls. They learned to use cosmetics, went for manicures, had their hair done. Camille couldn't afford any of that. Not that she didn't want to. Sometimes she thought her grandmother was too strict. But then she remembered that Emily had a weak heart and that life in the modern world was not sugar just because of such loose morals. And any rudiments of Charlie's rebellious sentiments were just wheat, without water, the heat of summer. However, Camille was not one of those dunces who can only be transformed by a beauty parlor. By adulthood, the girl's figure has acquired feminine, soft, and lush in the right places outlines. She had a slightly elongated face with high sharks, straight nose, and wide sensual mouth. Gray eyes dazed, black fluffy lashes, long brown hair no one had ever seen. Tucked otherwise in one of three hairstyles, 2 braids on the sides, 1 braid in the back, or 1 braid arranged in a wreath around her head. Add to that refined manners, shyness, modesty, and a habit of keeping in the shadows of everything bright, noisy, flashy, and modern. And also the fact that almost all her interests and daily activities filter only through her grandmother's opinion of whether it is worthy, whether it is decent. And if some meticulously outside observer were to analyze Camille's exactly outlandish exotic mess, he would easily find in everything the reason why those around her perceived her as a strange person. That's putting it mildly. And only in exceptional cases, such as in clashes with Stephen, who for the past 2 years had increasingly made her the object of his attacks. Light, but offensively barbed. Only on rare occasions did her usual calmness come off, and she began not that she would never be boorish, but would reply sharply and defend herself vigorously. "So you have nothing to do," Camille repeated. "Then go and study, you asshole, or help out in class 3. Someone broke a window. It's blowing. The kids need help." "Aha. You're fast." Stephen has his usual smile on his face. "No, you're still acting like a grandmother and thinking the same thing. You know I've sorted out my problems, don't you? I'm not getting expelled, thanks to Emily. She covered for me with our homeroom teacher. She realizes, if you give her the benefit of the doubt, that yes, Emily, she has 4 kids. She's a kind-hearted, fair person. You don't believe me. You want to bet on the test, and on Christopher will put 5, because his daddy brought her candy and something else. This guy was an incorrigible 2-timer, and no one in the class did not doubt that on the final test in math he will fail." Camille, of course, had heard of the couple, or rather, she had read about them. In some books, they were made by noblemen, and usually it didn't end well. There was no way she'd agree to some stupid bet. But today was not a good day at all. First thing in the morning, the grandmother thought her granddaughter had spritzed her granddaughter with cheap perfume. The girl swore that to grandmother's toilet stable did not go near, but she still made her go to the bathroom to wash off. Then it turned out that the grandmother just thought that in the closet there was a moth, so she put perfume in it. That's why Camille's clothes smelled. The grandmother didn't apologize, and her pupil felt unjustly offended. Then before school, she ran into a store to get tights. It was not a boutique, but a very modest youth clothing store. And this was where she and her grandmother sometimes came in when they needed to buy something that Emily had sewn but couldn't make at all. Usually it was something outerwear. This time one of the salesgirls didn't, as usual, just observe her from afar, but came up to her chest. The girl thought that she probably did so because her grandmother was not with her now, or she would never have dared to approach her. Grandma hated all sorts of consultants and knew how to drive them away quickly. The saleswoman talked about the fact that here our new products arrived. Youth clothes, very stylish denim skirts, and blouses beautiful. Camille glanced at it and turned away. No, even if she herself had been wearing what her grandmother sewed for 2 years now, there was no way she was going to upset her and dress differently. Pity, the girl sighed behind the back of the sales clerk, sharing with a colleague. What kind of savagery is this? How will she live when her grandmother is gone? Will be lost with such an attitude. Generally not adapted to life. No, she'll be left without an apartment or all those who beckon and where only the neighbor's teachers look. It was hard, painful to hear that. And yet Camille couldn't help but recognize this woman as Evelyn. I saw the name on the counselor's name tags. She's got a point. It was really creepy to think about the time when she'd be alone. Grandma had been talking a lot lately about how she would soon be taken to heaven by her grandfather, and she, Camille, if she misbehaved, she would end her days on the panel. So to prevent that from happening, she must study hard, behave herself, and be a man of honor. What's the bet? Camille blurted out before she could even think about what she was doing. That's a different conversation. Stephen's voice had a sort of muzzled, jubilant edge to it. Let's say if you're right, and Christopher fails, I get the money back that I won in the cleanup card. Camille nodded. That would be very good, just wonderful. Because Borka was a third grader, from a large family, and he'd lost everything he'd saved in pocket money for 6 months, and I'll sign up as a volunteer and go to the city park to plant trees. And I'm not gonna swear. Yeah, I'm in. Wait, he suddenly grabbed her wrist. You didn't even ask what you'd owe if you lost. And what do you want? She opened her eyes with her wrist. How did the burn not hurt? The grip was barely noticeable. It was some other strange perception of his closeness. You agreed to the bet, did you? But I did. You know, I don't really follow you. I don't have to. But I remember you said something in literature class about keeping your word, something about honor. I did. The girl exhaled and tensed, getting ready to pull her arm out, which means you keep your word. And if you lose, you'll come where I say and spend the night with me. Why the squeaky armor? Theoretically, the guy was very clear. Except in my brain. It's like an automatic system kicked in. From the logical decoding of this phrase to spend the night, why should I come to you for the night? But do not pretend that completely stupid. You understand everything, he said simply. And then he let her go, winked, and disappeared, as if dissolved among the racks. GRU was not left standing, barely breathing. You look in front of you. Oh no. What's going to happen to her now? How could she? How dare he? The girl clapped heavily. Was Stephen not enough of the atrocities he was doing? Why is he with her? For what? Here. And where a librarian appeared in the aisle. Having instructed the polite girl to arrange the books, she lined up for a Michko to drink tea. Oh, why are you so pale? Have you put all the books away? What do you need on the list? Yes, everything, answered Camille. Her thoughts had wandered a long way from the library. Thank you. I don't need anything. And she left quite a bit. From the elderly librarian by the fact that she did not even say goodbye. And then the day of the test came. Christopher sat next to Camille, and she, gently peering, realized that he had not solved the problems and the essence of nonsense. Finally, everyone turned in their notebooks. Camille looked triumphantly at Stephen, who was sitting on the Kamchatka. She had no doubt that everything would be as it should be, that justice would prevail. He would lose, would he keep his word to her, would be forced to take the path of correction. Let him promise everything just to annoy her. But in the end, it will all come back to him in a positive way. It will. I mean, it can't be any other way. And then we learned that Christopher got an A, and that's when I really wanted to go under. Stephen found her, or rather caught her just outside the school gates, just grew in front of her, so she bumped into him again. Hello. Hello, said the girl and lowered her head to the moon. What are we sad about? That it's not nice to lose, but it had to happen sometime. You can't live your whole life so right and perfect. You judge yourself. Step to the side. She tried to go around, but he wouldn't let her. So let's not get into any of your notions. Okay, we had a bet. Now you have to do what we agreed. You know, it's kind of funny, actually. If I were you, I'd be anybody else. I'm sure another girl could send me far and wide. But you're not like that. You gave your word, so here you go. He held out a piece of paper. My father had a cottage in the suburbs. There's no one there now. I'm coming on Saturday night. You're not going to cry. Don't worry, I won't touch you. We'll have a great time. I'll buy you a barbecue. Camille opened her mouth to say that she couldn't come anywhere, because how could she possibly explain her grandmother's absence at night? She didn't even have any girlfriends she could theoretically spend the night with. But she didn't say anything, just bowed her head sluggishly again and wandered home. Stephen left the walls of the school with an ambivalent feeling. On the one hand, he had managed to achieve today what seemed to him to be unrealistic. On the other hand, he felt as if he had gotten dirty in something nasty and filthy. Camille was not like other girls, and for more than 1 year had been for him only an object of interested mocking observation. But then he began to notice things that the others did not see. How good she was always straight back haughtily, but not haughtily. And what a right word for her aristocratic head planting. This girl never gossiped about others, never brought a cheat sheet. It was clear that she didn't live an easy life, but no one heard her complain. She seemed to exist in her own closed, like a soap bubble world. At recess, she'd duck into a book and just go blank. And then one day she's walking by and notices Stephen's in a bad mood. And she threw something like, "No offense," she wouldn't understand. This phrase referred to a conversation Stephen had had about 10 minutes before with his geography teacher, who had reprimanded him in a scathing, yes, personal way, for not done homework, and did not want to listen to the fact that there was simply no time for it, because in the apartment at Stephen started renovation in the bathroom, and he could not refuse to help. In general, she always scolded her students harshly for everything. After her husband's salary, because as rumor had it, the lion's share of this salary he took away to his mistress. So she found someone to vent her anger on, and it was this statement of Camille Stephen that caught her. He did not ask for pity, and no one dared to tell him what to think and feel. He tried hitting her breasts in response, with taunts, but it had all been bypassed. He began to watch her more, and he himself didn't realize how it had turned into an obsession. Yes, that word seemed quite true to him. And Stephen didn't want to do anything about it. Why? After all, apparently, like so many other people, already had a certain idea of him. So why disappoint her? Even if he never had a chance to win her favor in kind. Well, so be it. But he'll get his. Camille was welcomed home. Familiar, adored Smell's grandmother boiled for a late lunch. Chicken noodle soup and fried pies of broken dough with black caviar. But before sitting down at the table at the very doorstep, Grandma questioned Camille about the grade her test was given at school. Only when she was satisfied with the answer did she tell her to fan out and wash her hands. Then they sat down to watch some old Musketeers movie on TV. Then Grandma, even though it was already 8:00 p.m., took the crystal out of the closet. "I didn't have time to get through the morning. But it's necessary to do nothing at least in the evening. Hands from labor will not fall off," she said, giving the pupil an apron without on the couch, which was not avoided by any homework. Then Emily went to bed. Camille found herself left to herself. On the dial, the hands were getting close to midnight, inexorably approaching the coming of Saturday. She drew in a gasp of air and threw herself on the bed, closing her eyes. What was she to do? To break his word can be, of course, but hardly for such unfortunate behavior. She will immediately catch karma boomerang. That is, the well-deserved retribution from fate that her grandmother is so fond of talking about. And for some reason, Camille couldn't imagine what it would be like to exist afterwards. Not to mention that this very thing she'd signed up for menacingly sat up abruptly on the bed, then paced the room. Then a curse burst from her lips. Camille was more and more inclined to tell her grandmother everything and let her scold, let her punish. But then there would be a chance to make up her mind. What to do now? Grandma won't leave away. We'll say that, of course, there can only be a negative answer here. Granddaughter. The voice of an old woman in the corridor sounded. The girl flinched. Why is Grandma awake? She can't read minds. I think, granddaughter. Emily spoke in a hoarse voice. "Granddaughter," repeated Emily in a hoarse, weak voice of the heart that she ceased call soon. The ambulance arrived on time. The doctor said it looked very much like an approaching heart attack and hospitalization was necessary. Camille was thrashing around, gathering the things she would need at the hospital as instructed by her grandmother. Emily was taken away. Camille returned to the apartment, locked the front door, sank down on the hallway banquette, and covered her face with her hands and sobbed. What a nightmare everything was turning out to be, just a black streak. And at the same time, it was impossible not to recognize that this misfortune allows her to carry out her plans. After all, the grandmother will spend a few days in the hospital, which means that the fact that the granddaughter did not spend the night at home will not become known to her. Frivolous books, erotic movies. This was not on the cultural and educational menu that the grandmother had prepared for Camille. Naturally, the young girl had some knowledge of the relationship between the sexes, and the school program introduced her to the fact that children are not found in cabbage. And yet the girl realized that if she thought about the fact that she had a little more to do, she would simply lose her feelings. Theoretically, of course, in this, there was a plus date canceled. But there was also a downside. She would essentially be betraying her habit of being an honest person. Like today, you lied about being sick of the cutlet, and then you threw them away. My grandmother once reprimanded her, and for some reason that incident was particularly sharp in George's memory. And tomorrow the grandmother narrowed her eyebrows and slapped the very missing cutlets in front of the pupil. Are you going to steal? Or will you run over a man with a car? Yes, on a green light. Grandma, forgive me, please. Choking on tears, asked little Camille, you will not make me finish them. They were in the garbage pails. How smart are you? Emily stroked the girl's head and then grabbed her ear and pulled her from the table. Take them out and give them to the stray cats that live in the basement. Put your hand straight up and throw it down. Grandma, from fear, the girl even stopped crying. We do not have cats living under the house. Only the rats are there. I don't want to. Too late, dear, grinned the old woman. You have to take responsibility for your actions. And if a rat bites your fingers, she said, touching each of the 5 fingers on her granddaughter's left hand, it's your own fault. I'm a sweetheart. I'm ready to love all kinds of you. Even if you were crooked in the face, even if you got D's in school. But if I knew you were lying, I'll know you don't keep your word. You're gonna lie to me one more time. That's how you're gonna get me in the coffin. You won't have a grandmother anymore. You'll go to an orphanage. I'll live off you. After that, 10-year-old Camille realized that she would always be an honest person and would not break her word. To go and give herself into the hands of a monster in human form. Camille chose her weekend most dressy dress, snow-white Richelieu fabric, skirt, sun and sleeves, wings. She blocked her hair with a dark green ribbon over the dress, a light green shade, the young green foliage of cashmere. She decided not to think about what would happen until it happened. She decided to take things one step at a time, gather herself and check that all electrical appliances were off, leave the apartment and from her home at the bus stop, take a bus to the station where the commuter trains leave from, get off the light version of the train. And she was a little confused, but she was given directions. It was to walk across a field. It wasn't scary. There were other people walking there. Some merry company, a grandmother, a vegetable gardener. They were singing songs, and suddenly a strong young voice broke into their old chorus. The grandmother shared with an extraordinary companion, who was so young knew the words of an ancient Schlager, but immediately sang again. And so the whole company reached the dacha community. It was separated from a small village with the funny name of Jersey Pole, where in the old days they used to graze giant herds of cows, and now rare cattle kept by the locals. And a little farther to the south, the village and dachas were described by the river. In the heat of the summer months, it dries up almost to the bottom. Who are you, sweetheart? Asked one of the old ladies. Yes, that one staggered off. Acquaintances asked to get something, and she waved her hand in the direction of generally towards the forest, not houses. Well, happily ever after, the old lady said. Figured the girl didn't want to talk about herself. That's fine. Stephen's cottage turned out to be, and indeed, almost by the forest, stood on the very edge of the community, and it looked pretty abandoned. Camille looks like that. What a place to pick for a date. He couldn't ask her home either. She knew he didn't live alone. He was being raised by some distant relative. After Stephen's father was imprisoned for another theft a few years ago, Camille also knew that the boy's father had passed away last year. Then she sympathized with him and even tried to get close to him, to comfort him somehow. A man's grief. Maybe he realized her attention then. Wrong. He was imagining things. By evening, it was noticeably colder, and the girl chose her clothes according to the weather lunchtime, still sunny and warm. But now it turned out not to matter at all. The fact that the body crept shivering. What was frightening was something else entirely. Finally, it was on the porch and knocked on the door. "Hello," he said, and a look of amazement flashed across his face, as if he was sure she wasn't coming. "Hi," she said, and thought that awkward mutual greetings like this were becoming a habit. And the group didn't want to make any habits with this guy. "Come in." He stepped aside, letting her into the house. The girl froze slowly, as if there was something nightmarish waiting for her beyond the threshold. However, that was essentially what it was. Inside, the house was just as she had expected it to be. It was in need of repair and cleaning. The furniture had been brought in on the principle that it was worthless. The floors were painted a luscious orange. Camille remembered that the same floors had been in her grandmother's village house. She'd only been there a few times, and then Granny had sold it. She didn't have the energy to travel to keep everything in order, and it was too far away to be used as a summer house. But the main reason for getting rid of the ancestral nest was that she needed money for her Camille nurturing. That's the word nurturing Grandma used. By the way, when she wanted to reproach her granddaughter, say, "I spend so much effort, you nurture, and you still manage to just shrink in winter, tear a new dress for walks, refuse to drink fish oil for immunity, do not remove. You put toys." The list of reasons for reproaches was endless, and only having grown up, or rather in 15 years, Camille began to think about the fact that not everything was her fault. Just sometimes her grandmother needed a fight, and the person with whom it could be done at will. She was the only one who could do it. "So, do you want a drink?" Stephen threw awkwardly as he led the girl into the back of the house. "I don't drink." She dropped it and rolled on him warily. "No, I don't. I'm already aware of that. I'm asking about tea. No coffee." "No, I'm not asking for that." "And you can." And Nastya got the purse handles first, so we switched knuckles. "I know I lost the bet, and I keep my word. I'm ready, but can you hurry it up?" The last word she threw at him angrily, determined to cross the distance between them. She stood close again, and he could almost feel her breath. So Stephen stared, dumbfounded. "I realize I have quite a reputation, but why were you pouncing on me? What was the courtesan used to call these girls of such behavior? You see, it turns out we can speak the same language." And he smirked. "Okay, that was an unfortunate comparison. I'm sorry, but what do you think? I jumped on you like a barbarian right here on the doorstep, threatening you without answering anything." Stephen sighed strangely and stepped back, shoving his hands into the pockets of his jeans. It was gloomy in this part of the cottage. The light poured in from the open door on the right, and there were two of them. The long hallway was junked. The living room was junked, or rather the living room was junked, because in principle there could not be a living room in the cottage. Camille was more inclined to the latter, if to take into account the fireplace, which, apparently, had not been heated for 100 years. It was so dusty with some kind of garbage inside, but she was much more interested in Stephen than in the surroundings. On the way here, her mind was drawing the most fantastic, disgusting pictures, and she imagined being at the mercy of a cynical, immoral scumbag. But for some reason it seemed that now she was just a boy who wanted to seem tough, like the bad guys in action movies, but he's desperately afraid of it. So you're shivering and you're gonna sneeze tomorrow. Apparently, the prolonged silence, in which they froze like two exhibits in an abandoned museum, began to irritate him. Come on, I'll put the tea on. Camille doomedly sank down next. What's all this for? What's to make me tea? It's logical, because you touched it. What does it matter if you're going to? What are you doing? A girl ran in. When Stephen pulled her sweater over her head, the guy froze. I rounded my eyes. She took a step back and still had her back against the wall and held her purse out in front of her in a desperate protective gesture. No, please, I'm not ready. A moment later, a scratchy woolen article of clothing flew into her face. Stupid. Hold it. It's cold to look at. Stephen, who remained in a t-shirt, turned his back to her and began to work on the gas stove. Put them on. I'm not peeking. The desire for warmth outweighed the embarrassment of using someone else's clothes, much less a man's, and Camille, tangling in the sleeves, pulled the sweater on. Thank you, she said quietly. So it's unlikely he heard. You know, I'm really surprised you came just to do a word of honor. It's kind of old-fashioned these days. I can't do otherwise, I shrugged, sitting down at the table. And if I were to argue something similar, like stealing something, it would never happen. Camille said smugly. Aha, so it's still within your moral framework. A teapot and a couple of cups were placed on the table. All three items clearly belonged to different services. That's not what I meant to say, the girl muttered. You cheated at all, caught me giving my word before I knew the terms. When he filled the cup, she put her palms around it. Though it was scary, hot, her body desperately needed to finally get a dose of warmth. Okay, I give up. I'm a scoundrel and a molester. But the end justified the means. He smiled and sat down next to me. There's nothing for tea, she asked timidly, suddenly realizing that her stomach protests against the empty drink and lunch and dinner for nervous thoughts, the ground as it was missed. There were chips and a chocolate bar, but I ate them while I was waiting for you. And the euros. Here's half a chocolate bar. He put the candy on the table. I see. For a while there was silence in the kitchen, where a lone light bulb shone, apart from the sounds of tea drinking. What was that? Was Camille suddenly alert? I didn't hear anything, Stephen said nonchalantly. Did I hear something that made you think there was someone else in the house? The girl went cold. No, you're lying. I'm not lying. There's no one here. The boy nodded at the doorway. Beside him, a puppy, a well-fed little thing that looked like a street Bernard sheepdog, peered into the room. He wiggled his nose funny and shook his paw. The first out of lively young curiosity. The second, because the paw was occupied by a screw. Oh, he's so cute. Camille flew off her chair and was at the puppy's side in a flash. Grandma's strict upbringing included, among other rules, one that said no animals in my house, no dogs in the street. They'll chew them up. They'll freeze. Lock-a-me. The puppy was taken aside, but then attracted by the fact that the stranger was wearing a master-smelling sweater, pitched forward. Where'd he come from? When I was on my way here, he came after me at the station. He must have hurt his paw in the street. I swallowed a little. You'll keep him, or else. I have the right now. Unhappily, Stephen grinned. He'll live at the dacha for now, of course. When I leave here on weekdays, so he'll stay with the neighbors. I've already made arrangements, and then I'll take it all to myself. I've decided to rent an apartment. I'm looking for options to bring him back to where I live now. I can't just throw him out on the street. Stephen whistled, calling the dog, but the girl didn't let him make a move. Picked him up in her arms, went back to the table, slightly pulled out a chair, sat down, and placed the puppy on her lap. Bilek stated a fact already known to the boy. Pretty as he was, he also reached out to pet him, and their fingers met in a thick laugh. And the laughter must have stayed on the train, because both of them felt a pang, a strange pulling sensation. Camille froze, eyes wide open, watching the guy's face grow closer. "How beautiful are you?" he whispered. The next moment their lips made contact. About the flu, I had read about the miracle of the first kiss. But she wasn't thinking yet how it could be hers, much less envisioning that it could be so dizzying. Like being dropped into the sky with this guy. And while the kiss lasted, she forgot all about the unhappiness with her grandmother, about the fact that he'd forced her into a terrible moral downfall, that she was entirely at his mercy. The kiss was interrupted for a trivial reason, and they realized they needed a breath of air. Immediately, the magic of the first intimacy vanished. Camille's hazy gaze was a dream. And now, instead of sweet tenderness, it read disgust and contempt. And Stephen in response immediately looked haughtily mockingly, so looks the winner on the coveted trophy, which has already managed to touch. And now the moment of total possession is at hand. "I hate it." The voice didn't waver. The puppy, as if sensing the mood of people, jumped from her lap. Master of the place informed him master and dog kneeled. Somewhere in the hallway, stupid name Camille was now ready to say anything to hurt him. Other more graceful and sturdy expressions. She was still going through her mind. "Didn't ask you," risked the guy, rising from the table. She shuffled out of her chair upward, weighed down, and did what all sorts of wilderness survival instructors advise against doing under any circumstances. Turned to the top predator in the house behind her back one moment, and he put his arms around her, turning her to face him, or rather, pulled her to him, so that the fragile girl's hands pressed against his chest. The forces were, of course, unequal, and he in an instant broke her resistance in the loins. The girl was jabbed from the edge of the steel, and she wrinkled her nose, which he interpreted to his own understanding. "A girl like you would never mess with someone like me. But still, you think I'd pass up a chance to at least give you a good kiss? Not a chance in hell." She was about to tell him everything she thought of him and his heartless wager, but only exhaled, clenched her eyes convulsively, realizing she was going to kiss again, and immediately opened her eyes, hearing glass break somewhere nearby. Stephen heard it too, let go so sharply that Camille staggered. It was only because she clutched her fingers to the table to the point of pain that she did not fall that he cut the question short, pressing his finger to her lips. The girl was pierced with fear. It wasn't even a misunderstanding that something wrong was happening, but a pure underlying feeling. What might be called primitive intuition, for centuries guarding man from trouble. "Is there someone in the house?" whispered Stephen, and extinguished the light in the kitchen quietly. Now they heard together in the far room of what was on the other side of the living room, the hallway. Someone was treading heavily. More than one person, it seemed. "Damn it." Stephen sagged, and Camille glanced at him, wondering how, however, they could express themselves so similarly. The occasions, of course, were quite different. "Thieves are thieves," for the girl whispered. "That one has nothing to take, and usually climbs up to the cottages in winter," answered Stephen. And though it was almost dark, only the light of the moon slipped sparingly through the window. The girl could have sworn that he turned pale. "Gotta get away. Must be summoned," she said. "The telephone in that room," he muttered through his teeth and turned to her. "It's yours." Camille quietly took her purse from the table. "I opened it. I forgot it at home." Stephen waved his hand, whether to mean okay or not. "What an idiot. Go on. Get out. Call the neighbors from them." "And you asked the girl?" The young men were already in the front of the house, and those who had entered it in the middle of the night, judging from the sounds, moved from a room that could be called a bedroom. Beyond the door, a narrow bed was visible. There was a covered veranda adjoining it, and also playing the part of a huge closet. All this Stephen appraised briskly, pondering what to do next. The door to the second room was still open when Camille entered the cottage, and apparently the puppy had gone out of there. And it had even returned. "I'll get the master and come out too," the boy replied. "No, you can't do that." With an unconscious gesture, she grabbed his arm and pulled him. "Go already, fool." Shook her off him, and go already." Saying this, Stephen disappeared into the gloom of the room. Camille clasped his hands together. He is right. She should run and call for help. Why should she get in the way? After all, she hadn't come here of her own free will. And Stephen is not a good man at all. The girl went to the front door, opened it. Luckily, it didn't creak. It was brighter outside than in the house, and already from the porch you could see the warm light, the lights in the houses of neighbors. But at that moment there was a scream behind her. Camille rushed back and again, as if not realizing what she was doing, grabbed something from the stack of boxes, apparently prepared for taking out the change. Something heavy but comfortably lodged in the cramped palm of her hand approached the doorway. Grimly, she cautiously peered inside, and only by an incredible effort restrained herself from shrieking. Stephen was lying on the floor, with some scrawny type bent over him. His long arms frantically groped the guy, as if the legs of a giant spider made to taste his prey. "What is it?" A second type raised his voice. He was not visible at once, for he was standing at the other end of the room at the exit to the veranda. "Nothing," answered arm's length hoarsely, curled into a cough. "I guess Mio fooled us." "No way." The second type swayed. And Camille, continuing her observation, it seemed that they were both drunk. "It's got to be. The kid knows something for sure, but he's being sea-lynched. What do you want to knit with? Hold on. I'll look." Camille backed up so she was hidden by the wall. She didn't plan. She didn't wonder how big her chances were. She had almost ceased to realize herself, and there was only one aspiration left. One decision: she can't leave here. That's the way with these villains. The girl could almost physically feel the threat coming from them. They were apparently looking for something, but that was unimportant. The moment the arm-length, chain-linked man stepped into the antechamber of the living room, a cast-iron skillet fell upon him. The blow struck him squarely on the head, and most of the weight of the cast-iron utensil fell upon his shoulder. The stranger howled, then grunted and collapsed senseless. Camille, before anything else could react, Sama rushed into the room and just threw the skillet forward at random. She was lucky. Those who had entered the house had not expected to find anyone other than the boy son of their longtime debtor. So they were confused, but the second guy managed to dodge. He darted into the veranda. Frightened by the attack, he did not rush to the aid of his accomplice, because he did not know who else was here. Stephen moved and began to rise. Stephen ran. The girl rushed to him and suddenly jerked upward hard, helping him up. "I told you." The boy dropped his tongue behind his flying tongue and grimaced with pain. The blow of the bandit who had attacked earlier came in the jaw, and judging by the sensations, now it was impossible to do without a visit to the dentist. The villain, who opened on the veranda, had a flashlight with him. Its beam snatched the young men, and they turned around in sync. Accurately caught in the forest clearing by the light of the headlights, young Alyosha, "Ah," you foully swore and spat through his teeth, a man in the characteristic clothes of a prisoner. "The girl is still light. Where are you standing? Let's run, Camille. It's the end of you." And the convict took out from his belt something that glinted in the cold light of the moon like steel. They were separated by a few meters, 3 or 4 meters. Stephen came to his senses, and together with the girl, rushed to the exit of the room. He was not a coward, but he was not a fool to stay heroically in the house and engage in hand-to-hand combat. The puppy was yapping at his master's feet. He wasn't a coward either, but he was too young. And when they got into the house, he was just too scared. He scrambled under the one who cried his own way. And now, with 2 good acquaintances around at once, he took the risk of getting out. Camille took an extra couple of seconds to bend down and pick up the mala. "How you round your eyes?" Stephen, when they stepped over, or rather jumped over the louse on the floor of the convict. Such a thing he had not expected from his unwilling guest. But all questions could wait. Without collusion, and without wasting any more breath on superfluous words, young people with a puppy under their arm rushed out of the house and dashed across the lot to a neighbor's dacha. They didn't even turn around to see if they were being chased in. ran out onto the porch for the door drums. Help. Call the police. Help. The events that followed merged into several long. Later we recall them, as if through the fog of a clock. Alarmed neighbors came to the rescue. And soon those who had broken into Stephen's father's cottage in the middle of the night were captured. They were indeed, as Camille had immediately thought, escaped convicts. An ambulance and a doctor also arrived. After examining Stephen, he said that, in principle, it was nothing serious. The jaw was not broken. And that's the main thing. Young lady, you don't risk it anymore. The doctor turned to Camille alone on such a big guy with a frying pan. Dashing. But what if you'd missed? I can't imagine. What else was I supposed to do? Now that it was over, Camille couldn't stop shivering, even though she was drinking a second mug of scalding hot tea. And 2 woolen plaids, given out by surly, unworthy neighbors, were thrown on her shoulders at once. Stephen disobeyed and looked out still into the street, just when the very convict who attacked him biked to the police car. Too bad he had no time to fight back. Stephen spat on the ground and threatened the man with his fist. He swore at the police. Walking with his feet, he rushed into the fight again. But naturally, no one let him. Stephen heard a couple more nasty things about himself and his father. It's all clear, he muttered. He went back into the house and sat down at the table, leaning over his cup. Then he explained to Camille who it was. It turned out that 2 prisoners had escaped from the very colony where Stephen's father and his cottage were located. They didn't choose it at random. He liked to lie all his life, Stephen said. One could sense that he was both eager to speak out and uncomfortable with his own need for candor. And Georgia also noticed for the umpteenth time that Stephen calls his father he. But in principle, such an oddity was already familiar since the boy's parent went to the colony 4 years ago. Stephen almost never said either father or John. And here he lied, thinking it would add to his influence in the zone. Bitter. The young man grinned. He didn't keep quiet while he was still at home. He lied that there was gold buried in the dacha, which he stole back in the 90s. You can imagine, Stephen usually spoke about his father without emotion. But now, apparently, against the background of the experience, his intonation was combined with indignation. He lied to my little boy that there was gold in the garden. And I wasn't even then. I used to take a shovel and dig joyfully from fence to fence, from where I took strength. And he was laughing. So there's no gold? Camille asked. No, of course not. Yes, everyone was looking for it with metal detectors. About 10 years ago, they rented the summer house to some students. They heard all this nonsense and started to turn the place upside down, looking for it. And there was never any gold. It's that simple. He just couldn't accept that he was no longer the big bandit everyone feared, which he had once lost at cards. Mom left us back then. That's probably why he went completely off the rails. So he created the illusion that he had money. It's just not time to take it yet. What a bastard. Stephen raised his voice. Even before he died, he had time to shoot the whole psycho out there. How do I know that no one else will come here to this El Dorado on the outskirts? I'm fed up. I'm leaving. How are you leaving? Camille was confused. It was none of her business. And if she had the opportunity to go away and never see Stephen again in her life. But a little earlier, before this attack had happened, she would have gladly taken it, and would even have given much for such a gift of fate. But now she could not explain it to herself. She didn't want to get into the intricacies of her feelings, but she just suddenly realized that she cared about Stephen. It was discouraging, made her feel like a bad and spoiled girl. But Camille couldn't change that, even if she really wanted to. And you'll pass your exams. Stephen stretched out his hand and snapped his fingers in front of her nose. Wake up. What exams? What will this school give me? What about getting into the institute? She whispered. Woolen plaids. Would they slip off my shoulders? But the girl didn't even notice, declaring them cool. Aha, An institute like me is lost. Nothing in life is ours for the taking. Stephen averted his eyes. No, you're not missing. You don't have to be. It's not like you have to be like your father, or that you have to live your whole life miserable. You can be anything you want to be. Now Camille's voice sounded firm and determined, as if she had to speak to a large audience, such as her own class, and she had something very important to tell them. What do you know about me? Stephen said this in his usual mockingly arrogant tone, but in his eyes he read a different kind of loneliness and lostness, as if he were suddenly alone in the world. Camille knew, in fact, that he was. She could have sworn that this guy didn't have any really close friends, the kind you trust like yourself, the kind who wouldn't let you go to waste. And then a thought struck like lightning. She does. A grandmother is different. A family member. She replaced mom and dad. But it's still different, and she has no friends of her own. Are you right? She answered. And I know the rumors, and what you said yourself. And that's not much. It doesn't have to be more than that. Stephen rose abruptly from the table. Shall we? Can I call you a cab home? And what else? Robert, neighbor and owner of the cottage, intervened in the conversation. He wasn't eavesdropping on the conversation. It's just that he had his own business with Sprouts and in the next room, and he happened to overhear a lot of things. Robert had known Stephen for 3 years, that is, exactly since he had bought the plot. At first he had thought Stephen was a guy, and a felon without 5 minutes. That was how the distant relative of the young man, who had become his guardian, had put it. But then Robert changed his mind. If only because no one in the cottage community and the surrounding villages could not recall any bad deeds in which Stephen was involved. If only because this kid had been seen doing good deeds here and there. He'd helped fix up one grandmother's cattle shed. In the village, he helped to find lost cats of some townspeople who came to the country house for summer vacations. He participated in clearing the pond of all kinds of garbage, and even once tamed a local gang of hooligans when they started molesting the girls' daughters of the owners of the lost cat. All in all, Stephen, in Robert's opinion, was a great guy. He didn't really understand what Camille had to do with him, and decided that she must be his girlfriend. Romantic interest, so to speak. Let's have a show. These seats are enough bedding. I'll give you all kinds of stuff. 2 seats. Now we'll arrange the youth. We'll have tea in the morning. Robert waved his hand. And then I'll give you both a ride to the station. It's a deal. Camille and Stephen nodded in agreement. That's how it was done. Glushenko. Finally, you're back. Rushed to the girl looked out of the apartment across the street neighbor. Good afternoon, Jenna. The girl smiled politely. Yes, I slept over at a friend's place. She had already prepared a lie about the fact that this friend had a small child, and she had to go to the night shift. And her husband, too. And that's until she gets the schedules just right. Looking for friends who will sit with the baby. But the next words of her neighbor almost made Camille faint. I got a call. I know your grandmother well. Jenna spoke quickly. The hospital called. They couldn't reach you. Oh, what a grief. She was in good health, wasn't she? What? What's wrong with Grandma? Camille was leaning against the wall in the driveway. I got the call. So the neighbor was in no hurry to get to the point. Anyway, Emily took a sudden turn for the worse during the night. The doctors were frantic. Oh, what a grief. You're all alone. The neighbor, the grandmother, stretched out. Grandma, she's dead. Camille's hand went to her neck. How hard is it to breathe? It felt like the sky was going to collapse on my head. Isn't it ridiculous just like that? Was she far away from her grandmother in her last hour? No. Why would you think that? Ooh, spit it out. The neighbor waved her hands. Don't you listen to me at all. What am I telling you? You're a fool. I said you're the only one left since Grandma went to the hospital. It must be hard for you to be alone. Anyway, by morning, she was feeling better. And I got another call. To say they'd never seen a patient recover so quickly. They said she'd be home in a week. "Oh, why are you so pale? It's not even alive, Jenna." The girl shook her head and turned away and began to jingle her keys, opening the door of her apartment. "You can't talk at all. The whole neighborhood doesn't like you for it." And she went into her apartment and slammed the door rudely, without even saying goodbye to her neighbor. Jenna stood there with her mouth open. Camille had never allowed herself anything like that before. "However," said the neighbor, and then, remembering that she had put in the queen chicken for soup, yes, put the fire on high. Ouch, poked and ran away to her room. Grandma was indeed soon discharged home, and the life of the small Camille family quickly returned to the usual course. But then it became clear that something was changing. Camille often thought of Stephen. They hadn't seen each other since they had parted at the station. The boy said he'd take the next train. In the meantime, he wanted to walk a little longer and think about everything. Sometimes, walking down the street, caught herself looking for him with her eyes. Why? She couldn't explain it clearly to herself. But she remembered what he had said at the station. Before the train started, he'd said he was very sorry for her and apologized for the idiotic bet. "I thought I'd feel better if I got you." It only made it worse. He didn't explain anything else, just disappeared. Camille once thought maybe she could find him herself, just go to his house. Maybe he hadn't moved out of his family's apartment yet, but every time he pulled himself away from such pointless stupidity. Then, as the train pulled away from Camille, Stephen gave her a look, then tugged the puppy's leash lightly. Went for a walk. He really had a lot to think about. Time after time he replayed the events of the previous evening, but not until the strangers broke into the house. When Georgia was still to come, Stephen could not find a place for himself. With his mind, he knew that he could triumph and get literally anything he wanted from her, except that his own recent impudence somehow began to seem like an unworthy dirty deed. And imagining what would happen when the girl crossed the threshold of the cottage, Stephen somehow could not in his own fantasies commit anything obscene. The most he imagined was a kiss. And this indecision, some silly modesty, only irritated him more. Then he belatedly also thought about the fact that, as promised then in the library, can tomorrow theoretically treat kebabs. Pork and marinade were standing in the fridge, but nothing. Now for evening tea, there's no such thing. It turned out quite invited the girl of his dreams cannot accept. The dog pulled sharply on the leash, thereby pulling Stephen out of his thoughts. "Ah, no," said the boy. "There's some geese grazing out there. Let's not go hunting them. Let's go in the grass over there. You little dog. It'll be like a jungle for you. Let's play." But even fun with Stephen's pet couldn't stop the thoughts from flowing. Only now they took a different direction. He suddenly remembered how many times his father had grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and, giving not fresh breath, said that they were of the same breed and that Stephen's destiny was to be a thief, a bandit, and that at 6, at 8, at 10 he had hated his father like that, fought him off, shouted that he would never do such abominations as he did, and his father would get furious and threaten to teach his son reason. And then, growing up, Stephen began to realize that many people were not ready to listen to him about what he was like on his own. It turned out that many people perceived him as the son of the very thief John from some house. Stephen faced the fact that children were forbidden to play with him. He was looked down upon in the local stores, as if he was 12 years old and all he could think about was stealing. Distrust, contempt. Stephen responded to all of this with muffled resentment. And then other feelings came in. Stephen became hostile to the world. He did not want to be like his father, but he also realized that he was too often seen as a creature in John's shadow, as an extension of him. Stephen grew up a disobedient child. He realized early on that he didn't need to ask about his mother. It was enough for him to have one frank conversation with his father, who told him that she had left him for a new family, where the husband was all right and rich, and where other normal children had already been born. That was enough for Stephen to realize that his mother was gone, as if he was a half-orphan with a living parent, And then it happened that Stephen found an understanding with a group of guys who were considered the main bullies in the neighborhood. Somehow they got together, and it beckoned to him that these guys didn't suspect him of evil. They didn't bully him. Yes, they were not the ideal of virtue, real hooligans, but society with them beckoned. So he couldn't resist. Stephen, however, kept a little apart and did not participate in many of their scandalous antics. He was 16 when the leader of this kid gang said that they were not ready to be with them in everything. They don't need a man for one thing. Stephen stepped aside. Except the rumors about what a scumbag he was didn't go anywhere. They grew like mountain grass, and now he couldn't, and he didn't want to fight them. In fact, he decided it was probably better that they'd be more afraid of him, less likely to hurt him. And for a while it seemed normal to exist like that. But now Stephen wasn't so sure anymore. He was sickened to think that he had no other way but to follow the stereotypes around him. It was to the point of impossibility. Strangely enough, it was since he had started to get closer to Nina that he had been having these thoughts much more often. And after the events of that night, Stephen suddenly realized clearly he really could make his life anything he wanted it to be. It is only necessary to decide and quickly and definitively change everything. Despite the fact that final exams were approaching and free time had shrunk to the value of 0, Camille found a way to get a part-time job on Sundays. It was a lowly occupation handing out handbills to passers-by on the street, and it paid very little. But it was the very first money earned in the life of a young girl. After calculating the income for 2 weekends, Camille made a difficult decision. How scary was it? But it was too late to back out. It seemed to her that she was on her way to fulfillment. She was drawn by some unknown force that was impossible to resist. The first thing Camille did was to go to the pastry shop and choose a cake, a very small 1/2 kilo. But as the saleswoman assured her, it was homemade and delicious. It was a honey cake with a black currant layer. And then she walked into the mall to a familiar clothing store. Camille stopped with a frantic drinking heart at the racks, above which appealing plastic letters folded into discount words. "Can I help you with something?" Camille flinched as the girl counselor approached her. It was the slightly familiar Evelyn. For the first time in her life, Georgia felt so keenly that she looked wonderful. In an old-fashioned dress below the knee, she looked like a scarecrow to herself. "And I'd like to try this on," she said and pulled the shoulders of the dress. It was a smoke, someone's gray knee-high dress made of knit fabric with a couple of pockets. In front of it, Camille picked it out because it cost $49, and she had exactly $20 left after buying the cake. The consultant looked then at the dress, which was on unusual clientele, then at the dress, then at the shoulders. "You'll excuse me, but may I offer some advice?" She smiled timidly. "We have these leftovers from the last collection." And here, stepping back a step, she pointed to 4 mannequins who showed brightly colored sundresses made of cotton with flowers, accepted new collection. "We just haven't had time to put these models on sale yet. If you want, I'll bring your size now." The counselor was very friendly. "One moment, please." Camille had no time to say not to worry, but the consultant disappeared and then reappeared. She was carrying 4 sundresses in different colors and in 2 sizes each. And right now, Camille simply did not have the strength to refuse. As soon as these marvelous outfits were in her hands, it was as if a witch's spell had fallen on the girl. As a result, she came out of the examples, clutching a sundress with large flowers of 4 shades to her chest. "A lovely choice that suits you very well," continued to Count Evelyn, who immediately escorted just glowing with happiness customer to the oblique, and the Ran S. escorted her partner into the depths of the hall to correct the clothes that had been unfolded all that day. Sam took it upon herself to count her out. "Thank you for helping me choose." Camille smiled. Her cheeks burned feverishly with a blush. "Thank you, Evelyn. Always happy to help update the look," she smiled back. What Camille didn't know was that Evelyn had already looked at her closely before approaching her and realized, because the girl had counted the bills several times, that the budget for the cover was quite tiny. Camille was not aware of the fact that the sundress she had chosen actually cost $250 with all the discounts. "So you owe exactly $50, the consultant said with a nonchalant look. Camille was already holding out the money, but her eyes fell on the cash register display. It showed the real price. Evelyn had hoped the girl wouldn't notice it, but Camille hesitated and looked uncomprehendingly. "It's the old price. The system knocked it down." She found it quickly. "Evelyn, that'll be $50. And seeing that the girl was slow, Evelyn herself collected the bill from her hands and also motioned to her across the counter, rustling a bag of clothes. "Take it, please, and thank you for the purchase." They exchanged a glance, and it was so quick, piercingly clear. Camille was bringing the package to herself, as if not believing in its material, tangible reality. "Thank you." And she walked out of the store. Before the girl who had performed the cashier's duties in the store that day returned to her seat, Evelyn had time to take out of her pocket the wallet that she simply did not risk ever leaving in the staff locker room of the mall, and put the missing $200 for the sold sundress into the cash register. If at those moments there was anyone who would ask her about the reason for such an act, she would not be able to clearly answer what moved her, but certainly not ordinary pity. She simply decided that it was the right thing to do. That it was the right thing to do. The thing was, it wasn't the first time Evelyn had seen Camille in this store or in town. They lived on the same street, and even their houses were close together, window to window. Evelyn was not a gossip, but if you didn't live as a recluse, you'd learn about a lot of your neighbors, and especially about the ones people said were strange. That's how you get to know them from afar, from the words of strangers. Evelyn was acquainted with Emily's grandmother and her granddaughter. Evelyn herself had been raised in a single-parent household by her grandparents. True, not because of orphanhood. Just parents were constantly on business trips or on hiking trips. In general, they lived their own separate from the native child, a rich life. But Evelyn's grandparents were quite modern people, and so for her Camille's upbringing seemed wild. But there was nothing to be done. Evelyn had been married for a long time. It was the 10th year of their marriage. It was a happy union. And in principle, her husband's income would have allowed her to be a housewife. But when son Kevin went to the 1st grade, Evelyn decided that she had enough of her recluse and got a job at this mall, especially since she'd always wanted a job that had something to do with clothes. Perhaps, Evelyn sometimes thought, it was something passed down from her grandmother, who had worked for almost 40 years. It was here in the clothing store that Evelyn had gotten the chance to get to know her grandmother and the flu, and on visits from an old lady and a teenage girl, who then turned into a young and beautiful girl. The whole store, as they call it, was painful to watch, because Emily, in her peculiar manner, now and then yanked her granddaughter. "Don't touch the tear. No, you will not wear that kind of work, and it's not made for you. Put it back. I don't spend the money, I decide what you wear." These were the phrases that accompanied their trips to the store for down jackets, seasonal, and other outerwear. The unhappy child was echoed by another salesgirl. And what will grow out of her with such a grandmother? Evelyn shook her head. She didn't know what to say. She felt guilty for some reason. They were strangers. It turned out that it was impossible to watch indifferently all these years as the grandmother grows her granddaughter, keeping her as from diapers in a cocoon of strange, frightening, giving a slight madness, care. Was this what Evelyn had done with the sundress? She suddenly realized that something special seemed to have happened in Camille's life, something immeasurably important that had motivated her to finally break the cocoon. Her grandmother said to Camille, "Let's have some tea." Back home, the girl hastily hid in her room and went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, put out tea pairs from a special ceremonial service, which in general, according to the rules, appeared on the table only on holidays, and on the calendar with magnetic bright squares. It was a very ordinary Sunday. "What's that?" The old lady frowned. "When did you make that speech?" "I didn't bake." The grandmother smiled at Camille and motioned her to the table. "I don't want you to be angry." Okay, I decided on the weekend not to go out, not to the theater, and not to exhibitions, to go to the library. I did a little work. And Camille told her mentor what she'd been doing. I just decided that soon I will finish school, and I need to get some experience, how to work. Emily sat down at the table, very distrustfully looked at the piece of cake, which her granddaughter put on her plate. Grandma, it's natural, and it's fresh, it's true. But it is not always possible only to bake cakes. Sometimes you can. And how much did you make? 100, answered Camille. How much does a cake cost? 50. Where's the rest of the money? I'm Camille. I'm starving. My high school asked me to take a photo for the prom. I just said the first thing that popped into my head. And when Granny looked up, aroused blue eyes squinting intently, Camille had no doubt in those moments. She would be exposed now. But here Emily nodded. It used to be customary for elders to be asked what to do. Oh, come on. What can I take from you? There's no work after school. Are you going to study? The old woman finally put off the dessert with a spoon and took a piece of cake to her mouth. Granddaughter held her breath. That'll do, said Emily, and did not utter another word during the tea party. And then she asked to measure her blood pressure and settled down on the sofa in front of the TV to watch a documentary about VDNK. The girl was happy that the cake was met favorably. The grandmother was simply amazed at her good attitude. After all, the last time Camille had brought her a store-bought cake to the hospital, she had thrown it out the window, screaming about how she wouldn't poison herself with palm oil. Maybe today's tea party is a sign of good things to come. Camille, housekeeper on trial, smiled at her thoughts. But then she remembered Stephen again. It seemed an eternity since that unimaginable incident at the cottage. And in all that time she had not seen Stephen. It was as if he had disappeared from her life altogether, vanished into thin air. The only thing that was certain was that he had dropped out of school after all. It was so little surprise to anyone, though. And the vice principal, not hesitating in expressions, prophesied to this bully the most terrible end, like his father. Camille did not agree with her and almost spoke out loud, but restrained herself, for it did not change anything. Who would believe her that Stephen was not really as horrible a person as everyone thought he was? Camille successfully passed her final exams, and finally, the big day of graduation arrived. Grandmother knew in advance that he would wear his granddaughter a dark blue velvet dress, which she once wore to the school graduation. Mom Camille this dress under the black silk sand now hung on her shoulders, on the door of the platinum closet. But yesterday's schoolgirl, getting ready for her main holiday now in front of the mirror, admiring herself in a very different outfit, that sundress with marvelous lush pink flowers. For the first time, Camille had not put her hair in a braid. Instead, she had twisted it into curls from the evening before. Logic, of course, was not at home, but she used an old folk trick, and the curls turned out with the help of ordinary socks. Granddaughter, what took you so long? Are you late? Camille flinched when she heard her grandmother, but the smile remained on her face, and she felt more confident than ever. And with another glance at herself in the mirror, she walked resolutely toward the door. Emily jerked back, and if she hadn't taken her heart pills this morning, she might have had a second heart attack. Because granddaughter, how did she look? Like she's not even her own. That's her Georgian. Grandma, I love you very much. The girl intercepted the old woman's hands, gently squeezed her cold fingers, wrinkles, and hands. But I won't go to my mom in that dress. I've bought myself a paycheck. I just can't live like this anymore. Grandma, it's not right. And so they stood opposite each other, the old generation and the young, the closest people to each other, who sometimes could almost read each other's thoughts, and at the same time very different people who belonged to different worlds. But here Emily, as noted, lips and chin trembled, eyes darkened, hands withdrew and sighed deeply, full chest. Exhaled through her teeth. Camille hid her hands behind her back, lowered her eyes. I won't be long, Grandma. I'll just get my diploma, take a picture with the guys in the park, and go home, Grandma. She took a timid step towards the door. "I'll go." "Okay, go," Emily said unexpectedly calmly. "And don't be in a hurry. It's such a young thing." "Stop." She stopped when the girl opened the door to the landing. Emily opened the soap box. It was an old ceramic box with roses on the lid. The soap that had been stored in it almost 100 years ago was also scented with roses. Now it was used to store cash, with which people used to go to the store to buy groceries, pay for light, and so on. Determinedly, the old lady emptied the box of its contents. There were about 3,000. She handed it to her granddaughter. "As I recall, we didn't have a prom date, so tell whoever you need to tell. It's not out of favor that they're there to feed and water you." "Granny, go already." The old lady interrupted her and waved her hands as if she had chased away a butterfly that had accidentally flown into the house. "Or we'll be late." Camille left. Emily returned to the hall and sank into her favorite chair. Arms settled on the windowsills. She closed her eyes. Quietly, the clock flowed from beneath the closed ones. Tears rolled down the old woman's eyelids. But it was a light sadness. It was just a sudden realization that everything had grown up. Her granddaughter, though she tried to keep her from stupidity and temptations of vices of this world. I guess people are right. It's impossible to hide it from young people. Well, it remains, then, to hope only that it will not do any harm at all, that at least a little John in her head was able to put. And then Emily dozed off. Classmates saw Camille in the update, but the main thing in unusual such a form did not immediately recognize who was in front of them. For a while the cheerfulness died down and all eyes were fixed on the one who had come. Some of the guys whistled, and many girls looked at her with envy. It turned out that this girl had a gorgeous figure, and her hair was usually hidden in tight braids. Now she had lush silk curls. Camille. Anatoly Vladimirovich, the headmaster, approached the girl. "Are you gorgeous?" He simply spread his hands. I wouldn't be lying if I said that I had never seen a more beautiful graduate in my memory. Much later, looking back on that day, Camille understood that its bright events merged in the end into one long action, like multicolored glasses in a kaleidoscope are folded into one pattern. But this was true of the day until the moment when, after a walk in the park, a familiar voice suddenly called out to her. The sun was already slanting toward sunset. Its fiery golden rays penetrated the green of the trees and still blinded. So Camille squinted, and the silhouette of the guy standing nearby turned out to be quite blurred. "Stephen disbelieving," she said. The rest of the graduates didn't even notice her slipping away. Their first impressions had time to dissipate, and they were more interested in each other's company, leaving the oddly familiar to their high school roommate. As in years past to herself, Stephen stood at the entrance to the park, again in ripped jeans. But the jacket was a new brownish red and true to size. "Congratulations," he said and smiled. "Did you drop out of school after all?" The girl said reproachfully, although when she almost ran towards him, she wanted to say something else. "Busy. I had an apartment to sell and a summer house." He glanced from top to bottom and smirked back. "You're pretty, aren't you? Well, I'll leave you to it." He nodded at the group of school children in the distance. "I don't mind," Camille replied. "I guess I don't fit in after all." "You don't have to," said Stephen. "You'll find people you feel comfortable with." It was a strange word, and a phrase for him in general. Camille squinted. "So you've decided to leave after all?" "I have to find my place somewhere." "Okay." He clearly wanted to say something else, but he faltered and retreated a step. "Good luck, Camille. I didn't get a chance to say what I wanted to say." What do they need to talk about? That he's not completely alone. That she has to understand, just has to find out how to help him and... But all these thoughts were born in her mind. She couldn't put it all out coherently right now. She could only stare at him. How she needed him to take the tiniest step towards the tiniest drop himself. But he sent her a mesmerizing stare instead. His face contorted stiffly. And he, turning around, simply rushed to run to the bus stop. A shuttle bus stopped there, And at the same time, it seemed painfully clear that he was not just rushing toward the shuttle bus, but that he was running away from it, and from the conversation that could have taken place between them. Figures of swans surrounded by live snowy white hyacinth with flecks of icy pink. And we were beautiful. And if the organizers of this wedding reception had been asked to name the most successful element of the banquet decorations imposed, she would have pointed to these ice sculptures, rhythmically nodding a mini pen on the spread of a notebook, the entries in which were such small abbreviations that only their creator was able to decipher it. The girl looked at her creation magnificently. Thanks to this order, she would finally close the mortgage for the apartment. And also, perhaps, after it I can treat myself to a vacation, in which I have not been for the last 2 years. With a satisfied sigh and a nod to her own reflection, Camille returned the writing utensils to the pocket of an immaculately modest-tailored, smoke-something gray. The jacket that made up the set with the pencil skirt, plus the silk blouse of a delicate lavender hue, was stylish but not overly dressy. After all, she is a responsible person here, and in no case should not compete with the bride or even the guests. "Guys, this way." There was a voice behind her through the open door. Camille's eyes widened. Some workers with a stepladder and some other guy in a black suit entered the room. Over there, the guy stretched out, pointing at the wall. More precisely, on that part of it, which was located behind the seats for the young and was generously traumatized with silk and spoil, the folds of which were supported by golden Cupid figures. "Hey, what are you doing?" Resentment flooded in. "Trespassing on her domain. Girl, don't you dare touch anything here." The workers stopped and turned to their superiors, and the superiors to her security detail. Through a tall brunette and stuck his thumbs behind the belt of his pants smirked. It came out extremely cocky. "We're working. Please do not interfere. Do not interfere," indignantly flashed Camille. "Yes, do you know how long we've been laying this down? What do you think you're doing? Why didn't I do anything?" And then she was silent, because the young man's face seemed familiar. Stephen. Apparently, the mutual recognition came to them synchronously. "Camille," he said, "what are you doing here? A wedding?" She answered simply and, in general, quite matter-of-factly. "What are you doing here?" "I'm working too," he said. "So what are we doing?" asked one of the workers. "Yes. Wait, you." Stephen brushed it off and focused his attention back on the young woman in front of him. He had remembered her all these years, while he had been busy putting his life back together in a shard. And she remembered him too often, more often than he would have liked to remember a guy he knew from high school, not even a classmate. A close encounter that had taken place under less than romantic circumstances, but that had been in the past. And now they exchanged a few more phrases, and it turned out that Stephen was the head of security of David's fiance's father, a complicated man, a businessman, and even an oligarch. Stephen had spent almost all these years in other parts of the world, and then to work in a solid reputation in the security industry, decided to return to the city, which still considered the most native place. And this is where he eventually found his best job. "I never would have guessed," Camille said frankly, when Stephen told her what he was doing. "Well, of course, with my pedigree and track record," he replied. And it was not clear whether he was really offended or whether he was being kindly ironic about himself. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." Camille immediately fell into confusion. "It's okay, it's so familiar. It's like all those years of separation never happened." Stephen smirked. "And you, then, are the creator of all this." He circled the space with his hand. "It's pretty, but of course, terribly girly, if you know what I mean." "Not at all." Camille had always been very sensitive to criticism of her creations. She could only speak calmly about anything and everything directly to her clients. But the rest of us would be better off holding our tongues. Camille herself often regretted her temper, but found a reason for it. Apparently, it was inherited from her grandmother's temper. And the decoration is created taking into account the tastes and wishes of the bride and groom. Our agency is oriented on the current world trends in the field of wedding fashion, said the girl. Wait a minute, you bowed your head. What, you're married and you're doing things with your husband? Do you think that's the only way to do it? Did Camille frown again? No, it just occurred to me. He scratched the back of his head in a familiar gesture. I'm not married. That's wonderful. What do you mean? Never mind. So you started an agency with someone else, and you do weddings. Mostly them. But we also do wedding anniversaries, engagements. Do you do divorces? No. Camille was in such a weird state of mind talking to Stephen that she missed the ringing of her cell phone. The girl carried 2 miniature smartphones with her. The second one contained only personal contacts. And before, such a neglectful part to her professional duties was not peculiar to her. Who would ever think of celebrating a divorce? I don't know. He shrugged. I went to the sea for 2 weeks to celebrate. I just lay on the sand and matured to move on with my life. I asked about you and thought that if you like weddings so much, you should probably be married already. Maybe even more than once. Why is that? To the first impressions of the meeting, delighted surprise and even excitement. Heart palpitations begin to be joined by the familiar irritation of mere déjà vu. So it's weddings. How many different ones can be played, given the opportunity and imagination? Stephen spoke in a completely serious tone, but his eyes were laughing. I'm not married and haven't been yet, Camille replied, and nervously fixed her already perfect hair. The girl now wore a bob haircut. So what do you need to do here? From the cameras lost the image of the hall. Apparently, you didn't cover it up with your fancy stuff. So put the camera somewhere else. This is a perfect angle. That's not my problem. The design's already been thought out and you can't change it. Who cares where the bows are? This is about safety. What, you're afraid of the bride being stolen? Don't worry. It's not in the script. I don't know anything. Stephen was suddenly dangerously close, literally hovering over her. With all his weight, Camille thought, inappropriately enough, that he had grown noticeably bigger or shoulders heavier. It's been 10 years, Stephen said. You haven't changed at all. Very much. The girl felt awkward, and for some reason she was sure that it was treacherous, and the blush was clearly visible, despite the tone, except Anna and powder. So what to do? One of the workers, who had a lot to do, couldn't stand it. It's scheduled for this day. Camille and Stephen backed away, just bounced off each other, as if to scare them off. The flock of birds scattered, and soon, with Camille's instruction, the textile decor was moved so as not to block the CCTV cameras. Now it's all ready, smugly said the girl, and Stephen visibly perked up. Then we can talk. Camille wanted to say that she was terribly busy, but that would be untrue. And besides, she herself wanted to talk to the man who made her heart beat. So strange. Often all these years it was still hours before the wedding reception at the bride's father's mansion, and Stephen and she had agreed to sit on the back porch of the house for a little while. It was the quietest place now. They sat down directly on the steps, the English-style garden in front of them disheveled as if wild, but in fact artificially grown. Camille talked about how, after studying 2 years at university to become a philologist, she had realized that it was absolutely none of her business. And it was. Decided to take a big risk just to make a living for a while, as it turns out, and in parallel to look for herself. In the end, it turned out that she liked to create holidays, and 5 years ago, she and Evelyn created a small agency, which by now has become one of the leading agencies in the city. Evelyn. Stephen was surprised. The one whose husband's an electrician, and they have a son, Kevin. I remember her. She always treated me differently, he added, and he averted his eyes differently than the others. I know, Camille nodded. She and I were talking about you the other day, and she told me all about how you weren't a monster at all. And when you reminded me, you thought I was a monster. He squinted as if with a grudge and invited me to the cottage. I swear, I smiled menacingly. It was the most nightmarish date of my life and mine. I'd give anything to have it any other way. I mean, what kind of idiot was I, Anyway, I should have just asked her out to the movies properly. I mean, you don't have to be afraid to say no. I see. The girl nervously sent a strand of hair behind her ear. The conversation had suddenly turned into a direction that was not the most convenient for a free conversation. How's your grandmother? Stephen asked. She's fine. I'm amazed at her age, and she's still chipper. Her health, of course, sometimes fails her, but she's strong enough for 10 people. You know, it's only recently that I've been able to understand her. I thought when I was just out of high school that I was out of the nightmare. And then I realized that she just loved me so much and thought it was to protect me. I spoke to the doctor. Grandma is seeing a psychologist, Camille explained. She agreed to see him to find out why she was having bad dreams. And then somehow he got her talking. And it's made our life together easier. Anyway, the psychologist doesn't want to scare her, but he said it's kind of an obsession. She was lucky she stopped in time. You know, I feel so guilty sometimes for leaving my grandmother alone for so long. But I got her a nurse, a very decent woman. She takes good care of her. Now Grandma doesn't need anything. The girl saw the skirt on her knees. She looked carefully at Stephen, catching his gaze. How long have you been divorced? Last year. I told you. We didn't see eye to eye. I guess I'm just not a good person. For some reason, I thought you'd changed since then, and not for the worse. So I don't think you're a bad Stephen. And your mother? She was careful. Do you know what's wrong with her? I mean, you didn't think of me finding her, Stephen replied. And it seemed that he was ready to answer frankly to this question, but only wanted to get off as soon as possible. We talked calmly, peacefully, and she apologized and told me not to show up again. She really has a whole other life. I don't belong there, but I forgave her. That's it. Camille fell silent. They just sat side by side and watched the wind move the tall, lush grasses and the flowers among them. I had completely forgotten. The Magister exclaimed menacingly. He is a solid age for a dog of a dozen, but he is fine. Stephen smirked. He actually lives here with me. He's in the enclosure now. Do you want to say hello? He stood up and gave his hand to the girl. I do. She stood up, accepting his outstretched palm. Do you want to bed? Stephen rounded his eyes. This was something he hadn't expected at all. Terms. The master will recognize me at once, and then you'll give me a personal tour of the place. Tell me, what does the security service do? I only know from the movies. You walk around and talk to someone on the radio all the time. Yes, Stephen almost answered. And if you lose, then you can take a chance and ask me out. The young man grinned. It was a very tempting offer. And whatever the outcome of the bet, he somehow had no doubt that the date would happen, and it would be very easy to turn it into an excursion. Stephen also thought about the fact that he might just have to become a really good guy now. It was necessary to become a good husband for Camille.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Olivia walked slowly from the bus stop to the office. It was early morning October, and there was a gray pre-dawn gloom, a piercing wind and rain dripping down. The office building where she had recently taken a job as a cleaner was in an industrial area. A bit far from the bus stop, but what can you do? The pay was good, the work was scarce, and Olivia needed the money. Now it's an hour and a half to work before the employees come, and rather to another office, located in the center of the city. There's a lot less work in those buildings than in the stores. Olivia once worked as a cleaner in a large shopping center. No sooner does she clean the floor than someone already walked on it with dirty shoes and all over again, and some of them even threw garbage in front of her defiantly. They say that she is a cleaner, so fulfill your duties. It was humiliating, but what choice did she have? It is necessary to live somehow, to raise a daughter, and count on no one, along with Ashley at each other, in the whole world. Sometimes it became so dreary, there was no reliable male shoulder. She had to do everything by herself. Olivia had never known any parental affection at all. She saw that Mom and Dad support, even many adults. Her neighbor, for example, can quietly leave her children at her grandparents' and rest. Her parents give her gifts and money, and just a kind word to support her in a difficult moment. Everything is easier when you know that you are not alone. And if something happens to her, what will happen to Ashley? After all, they have no relatives ready to take the girl in. Will she be sent to an orphanage? Olivia grew up in an orphanage and did not want such a fate for her daughter. Usually parents regret that their children grow up quickly. Olivia, on the other hand, rejoiced at every new birthday for her daughter, another year older. Ashley recently turned 10 years old. She is already in the 4th grade. By the way, an excellent girl, only 8 years old, and an adult, consider that independent. If God forbid, what and will cope on her own. But of course, Olivia wanted to be near her daughter as long as possible and give her everything she never had: warmth, care, love, support. Ashley is such a good girl. Olivia dreamed of higher education for her. She herself felt she could have studied and worked in a more qualified position than a cleaner, but that's the way life was. What can you do? Not everyone is lucky. Olivia, a graduate of the orphanage, worked as a cleaner at several sites, 2 office buildings and a fitness center. It was possible to combine, however. Dancing with a mop had to be 10 hours a day. So in the evening the woman was very tired. Her lower back ached and her legs hummed, but she had enough to live on, and even for small pleasures, in the form of goodies and extra outfits for Ashley. Olivia liked to dress up her little princess, but she didn't think about herself. Why? She didn't need to attract men. She had enough of an affair with Ashley's father to realize that personal happiness was not for her. Of course, sometimes she dreamed of a prince who would protect her and her daughter from all the hardships of life. But the woman realized that there are no such men. It's just an invented ideal image. Once Olivia tried to work as a salesman. The work seems to be less hard, and the salary is more, but quickly realized that it is not her. A merchant should be quick, perky, be able to weigh, persuade to buy not liquid goods, but Olivia could not, and that's all. She was always honest, direct, and sincere. The owner once heard that the new seller, advising an old lady to buy tomatoes cheaper because expensive, beautiful to taste, like grass, and the same day calculated her. Why does he need such employees? And Olivia continued her usual business, washing offices, stores, entrances. The locations changed, but the function remained the same. How long is the drive? The office staff got here by car. Everyone had their own car, even the very young girls and boys. Olivia saw them when she finished her work and walked in the opposite direction to the bus stop. The employees of the company were just arriving at the office, and among all the employees, one young woman in her mid-30s, her age, stood out. Red, shiny in the sun, foreign car, dark glasses, loose hair, she looked so stylish, so refined. Olivia liked to fantasize about what this woman's life was like. Imagine yourself in her shoes. It's her, Olivia, sitting behind the wheel of a luxury car. The air conditioner is running. Her favorite tune is blasting from the stereo. She has a wealthy, handsome husband, caring parents who gave her a start in life. She is valued at work for her ability to make reports and plan competently. Ah, the dream life. And the building is still a long way off. Every morning Olivia had to get up at 5:30 to take the bus across town for an hour and then another half hour to get from the office stop. Olivia lived with her daughter on the outskirts of the city in a 5-story house. After graduating from the orphanage, she had been given a one-room tiny apartment as an orphan, a small bedroom and living room, a 6-meter kitchen, a long-needed bathroom with humming pipes, creaky wooden floors, but Olivia was happy. After so many years of living in a common room, finally her own corner, separate. Olivia turned it into a cozy nest, a quiet harbor in which it was so pleasant to shelter from the hardships of life. Here she felt good and relaxed. She had her own home. Being a pupil of an orphanage, Olivia entered college. She chose the specialty of cook and pastry chef. She always liked to study. Teachers noted that she had an excellent memory and aptitude for math, but of course, higher education was out of the question. It was urgent to get a working specialty. After graduation from the orphanage, there was only a year to study in college, and then, even if not a dream job, but a job that will definitely not leave hungry. Studying Olivia was given easily. The red diploma already loomed literally in front of the nose. There was only a year. The girl lived then on a scholarship, plus a part-time janitor, but plans for a profession was not destined to come true, because in the life of Olivia he appeared, the fun-loving and seemingly kind and reliable Adam. He studied at the same college, only a year older, and his specialty was different, a catering technologist, a more promising and difficult profession than Olivia, of which Adam periodically reminded. After college, the guy was going to serve in the army and then to graduate. I will work for my uncle at the dairy. He is the head of the sales department. He will find me a good position. Adam shared his plans, and Olivia listened and thought that this is happiness. Adam is a real man. He thinks about the future. He has so many prospects, and he is so smart, and how logically he thinks. You can't go to waste with someone like that. Olivia and Adam often met in the corridors of the college, but at first they did not pay much attention to each other. Olivia had liked him for a long time, smiling, lively, funny, witty, companionable, always surrounded by friends, and one day she ran into him in the same company. Her classmate was celebrating her birthday at the campground, and Adam was among the invitees. Olivia had already graduated from the orphanage and was settling into her new apartment. She felt happy and very grown up, independent. This feeling surrounded her head and created the illusion that the whole world lay at her feet. Adam, as always, was the center of attention. Many girls tried to flirt with him, but he only guffawed. Olivia laughed heartily at his witticisms and even had a few words with the local star. He honored her with his attention, wow, and even agreed with her opinion, supported her in the dialogue, and then the unbelievable happened. It was already evening. Young people were having fun in the house, rented for a day. Suddenly, Olivia became stuffy. She really wanted to go out into the air, to enjoy the evening coolness and silence of the pine forest. She wasn't going to go far from the base, of course, just in case. She didn't want to become the heroine of some horror movie. Olivia decided to go down to the lake and sit on the shore for a while, listening to the crickets chirping and admiring the stars, large, bright, and somehow very close, the kind you don't see in the city. On a rickety ladder, Olivia went down to the water. There was a luxurious wooden bench, still kept the warmth of the sun, which warmed her all day. It was so cozy to sit on it and look at the ripples on the surface of the lake and mesmerizing, sparkling moon path. And then he came, Adam. He silently settled down beside her. Olivia looked at him in surprise. He smiled a charming smile and broke the silence. "Would you like some company?" He's still asking. Of course, Olivia was all for it. Adam himself condescended to her, a simple girl. He has so many college hotties around him, and he's sitting here with her. "Are you enjoying the party?" asked the guy. "It's fun," Olivia admitted. "But I like it better here. I've never seen such big stars. Haven't you ever been out of town?" "Of course I have," answered Olivia. The orphanages sent their children to camp every summer, but there was an early departure, so the girl was really admiring the starry sky for the first time, not clouded by the light of city lights. "It's beautiful." Adam agreed, staring up at the sky. "But you know what's even more beautiful here?" Olivia shook her head negatively. "You," the guy simply replied, looking his companion straight in the eyes. It was not the first compliment Olivia had heard in her life. Ever since she was a little girl, her teachers had told her that she was very pretty, but to get a compliment from a guy, and a popular one at that, that was something else. Olivia was even dizzy with surprise. Did Adam really like her? "I've been watching you for a long time," the guy continued. "You are very beautiful and yet modest, not like the others. I finally decided to tell you about it." Olivia could not believe her ears. So Adam had liked her all this time, but he'd been too shy to tell her. Well, he was just skillful at hiding his feelings. The girl could not even imagine such a thing. "I'm sick of these painted dolls, like a copycat." Adam continued, "And you're real. You're not like the others. That's why I'm attracted to you." I don't even know what to say." Olivia confessed honestly, but her eyes shone with genuine joy, and Adam understood everything without further ado. He carefully and very gently put his arm around her shoulders. He looked her in the eyes, made sure that she didn't mind, and kissed Olivia. The girl had recently turned 18, but this was her first kiss. Unlike the girls from the orphanage and her classmates, she didn't go out with boys and didn't hurry to grow up. But now Olivia felt really happy, loved, desired, unique. Adam was near her. Warmth and sympathy emanated from him. Tears suddenly came to her eyes. It was nice to realize that you were the source of such strong feelings. After all, Olivia had never been so interested in anyone before, and now he was. "Let's go out," Adam simply suggested. Of course, Olivia immediately said yes. Nightingale sang in her soul. It seemed that life would now change 180 degrees, and everything would finally be fine. No more lonely evenings and longing for a soulmate. Later, the girl learned from mutual acquaintances what really attracted Adam, her free apartment, in which you could organize parties and actually live, without parental notations and control, without pressure and moralizing. The guy knew that Olivia was from an orphanage, and that graduates are given a separate living space. That's why he appeared in her life, just at that moment. He wanted freedom from his parents, who always demanded something from him. The guy got everything as he planned. Adam moved into Olivia's apartment, and now his friends were often here. Neighbors looked askew. No one liked the noisy parties that the guy liked to arrange, but Olivia did not pay attention to the comments. Happiness overshadowed her eyes. Adam was caring and attentive at first, gave flowers, showered with compliments, praised Olivia's cooking. After a noisy feast, he always cleaned the apartment, emptied cans from behind the radiator, washed the floors, shook out cigarette butts in the trash. The guy showed Olivia his favorite movies. The girl did not like them at all, but to make her lover happy, she assured him that she was delighted with such movies. They walked a lot, laughed. Sometimes Adam was away on family business. Then in a neighboring town with his parents went to some relatives. Then with his mother flew to the sea. At these moments, Olivia was left alone and again felt unhappy and lonely. Adam did not introduce her to her parents yet. He said it was too early. My mother does not want me to marry before the age of 25. She said children, family problems will come. They will pile up. There will be no time and energy for higher education. She wants to see me as a big man. Olivia understood everything and silently accepted the rules of the game. She was fine. 6 months passed when Olivia realized something was wrong with her: nausea in the mornings, dizziness, and latency. Everything pointed to the fact that she was pregnant. Although Adam had been using protection, something must have gone wrong at some point. A test from the drugstore confirmed those suspicions. Olivia looked at the 2 stripes and experienced a mixture of feelings. The first and the main feeling was joy. She would have a baby, a native being, her son or daughter. It was happiness. Somewhere in her chest, a warmth was already developing that made her feel so light and pleasant. But these were feelings, and her mind told her that not everything was so rosy. Adam finishes college and goes to the army in spring. She still has a whole year to study, and it's a very responsible time. She has to prepare for graduation, to do final work, to practice a lot. And how to manage it all? First with a big belly, and then with a baby in her arms. Yes, and Adam hoped that he would be happy with the news of imminent fatherhood. Of course, there was, but something told Olivia it is unlikely that he is now ready for it. The guy had shared his plans many times, including the army, college, and career. He certainly did not dream about children. The girl for a long time did not dare to tell her. It was good that the guy made the decision to leave on his own, not having to kick that traitor out. True then, left alone in his apartment, the girl still gave vent to tears. Of course, Olivia realized that it would be difficult, very difficult, but for the sake of the child she will cope. Adam then more than once called Olivia and approached her in college, persuaded her to abort, then promised a reward, then threatened, then painted pictures of the hopeless future of a single mother. The girl tried to avoid her former lover by all means. It is good that he has already graduated from college, and then in the army for a year goes, without him easier. Summer vacation came. When Olivia passed the session, the belly was not yet visible. No one and did not guess about her pregnancy. But in the summer everything became obvious. The term was already decent. Olivia had to update the closet. At the end of the summer, at the ultrasound at the women's clinics that the sex of the child, a girl, Olivia looked at the monitor and cried with emotion. She clearly saw the profile of her daughter, snub nose, convex forehead. It's just a miracle. The fetus is healthy and will be delivered around October 15. Indifferently informed the woman doctor. October 15, how many more things do we have to do before then? Olivia needed money, so she officially got a job. Now the girl not only worked as a janitor, but also washed the entrances. The salary increased several times, but there was also more work. It was hard for Olivia to work physically, but where could she go? She was lucky to be hired. At the interview, the girl carefully disguised her belly with a loose blouse. Then, of course, the boss told her everything. Came then, with a belly to work, got an official job. Now the sick leave will go, then you will go on maternity leave. Do you realize you've set us up? All you orphanages are like that, clever and cunning. Olivia was silent. Of course, it wasn't good to hide the fact that she was pregnant when she was employed. It wasn't fair, but what choice did she have? Olivia did not need any sick leave. The pregnancy was surprisingly easy. She went on maternity leave at the right time, and then continued to clean floors unofficially. She needed to save as much money as possible. For the birth of her daughter, Olivia prepared thoroughly. She bought a crib, a stroller, clothes for the newborn. She didn't have enough money for a new one, and who cares? The main thing, very soon she will have a daughter, the only relative in this not cozy world. For her sake, Olivia will make mountains, and everything will be fine. The girl was born on October 15. Ashley immediately announced the labor room with a loud scream, which caused a stream of compliments and from the midwife. How strong and healthy she is, and what a voice, and what a beauty. Olivia had long ago decided to name the girl Ashley. Olivia clutched her daughter to her chest, looked at her wrinkled red face. Tears rolled down the cheeks of the new mother. She could not cope with the feelings and emotions that overwhelmed her. Now that she had a child of her own, she understood her parents even less. How could they give up on her? Do these people now live quietly somewhere, knowing that they left their daughter, just abandoned at the train station, and fled? Olivia has vague memories of her early childhood. Sometimes she dreamed of something from those distant times, but all as if in a fog. No wonder, because when the policeman found Olivia at the train station, frightened and frozen, she was only 3 years old. The woman still remembered that moment. She was alone among a crowd of people. Everyone is in a hurry. The train is rumbling loudly nearby. She is scared and very hungry. A pack of stray dogs running past. For some reason, Olivia remembered these animals best of all, large, dirty, with tangles of bunched-up hair on their sides, but it was not them that the girl was afraid of. She was afraid of being alone. Before that, there had been grown-up people with her grown-up, probably parents. They had ridden trains together, run somewhere, sat on dark, cold staircases with crowds of people scurrying up and down them. Sometimes one of them would drop a coin into the box next to Olivia. The woman still remembered that small detail, the clinking sound of the coins hitting the bottom. As she grew older, she realized that her parents must have been asking for alms. But why? What had happened? Why did they not work, but picked up? Olivia did not look like a gypsy, blue eyes, light blonde hair. The police tried to look for the girl's parents, but the investigation was fruitless, so Olivia became a pupil of an orphanage at the age of 3.5. From her relatives, she had only a name and a pendant in the form of a key, a silver piece of jewelry on a simple cord. It was around her neck the day she was found at the train station. Olivia knew her own name very well, even at the age of 3, and confidently told it to the policeman, but the surname and address the girl, unfortunately, has not yet memorized. Olivia tried to remember the names of her parents, but nothing worked. But once she knew them exactly. Apparently, she had lost some of her memory due to stress. Stress had a devastating effect on the foundling. Finding herself in an unfamiliar environment, Olivia suddenly stopped speaking, as if she had become numb. Psychologists and speech therapists tried to work with her, but nothing helped. In the end, the child was abandoned and diagnosed with mental retardation. The disease scared away potential adopters from the pretty girl, so in childhood Olivia never found a new family. True then, after almost 10 years, Olivia came to her senses, thawed, speech returned, but it was too late. Teenagers are of little interest to adopters. They prefer babies. Until the 7th grade, Olivia was in a remedial class. After the return of speech, it turned out that she is very capable and speaks beautifully, and complex problems can solve. Teachers and educators were surprised, but what could they do? Yes, the girl is talented, but the time was lost. After the 9th grade, the administration sent Olivia to study at a culinary college. You are a smart girl, you will finish, and then, if you want, go to the university to study further, and so at least specialty bread in hand will be. Hungry will not stay hungry. Doris, the director of the orphanage, reasoned aloud. Olivia agreed with her. The girl was standing in Doris's office and nervously rubbing a pendant. the one from her past life, which she hardly remembered. The pendant. Olivia had cherished it as the only link between her and her family. It must have been worn around the little girl's neck by kind, caring hands. So someone loved her after all, if they made such a gift. There were some pleasant feelings associated with the pendant. Olivia felt as if she had asked someone to buy it for her. The little girl liked the key on the string very much. She was jumping on the spot and begging to make her a present. But who? Someone tall, kind, face is lost in the fog, but it is clear that this person's smiling mom, dad, uncle, family friend? It's hard to live without roots and without at least some information about relatives. Who is she? Where did she come from? How was her childhood? Does she have any siblings? What happened to her? And why did her parents abandon her, leaving her at the train station? As a teenager, Olivia invented the most unbelievable stories on this subject and always found good reasons for her parents' actions. They were pursued by bandits who wanted to take away Olivia's influential father's business, and Mom and Dad left her at the train station to save their daughter from the massacre. The girl imagined that she was taken by gypsies to beg for alms. By the way, the police worked on this version for some time, but no ends were found. I didn't want to think that she was the daughter of alcoholics and marginalized people who just didn't need a child, even though it was the most plausible option. How many of you are such babies? One of the educators was lamenting, looking at Olivia. I have a lot of experience, and in almost all cases, when babies were found at train stations and markets, their parents turned out to be unworthy people. You're lucky to be alive. You could have fallen on the tracks under the train, or dogs would have dragged you away, because such cases happen. The little girl Olivia did not believe that her parents could be one of those miserable creatures that sometimes came to the orphanage to visit their children. Skinny, wrinkled, ragged, with swollen faces, many without teeth. They always smelled pungent and unpleasant. Freaks! The nurse was indignant. They only need the children for their allowance, so that they have something to drink on. When they run out of money, they immediately remember their parental duty and come crawling back for their children, and children in these families are only misfortune. They'd be better off here in the State House. You probably have the same mom, and your dad may not even know about your existence. At first, the girl did not believe that her parents are marginalized, but as she grew older, she realized that this option is not excluded. Except for the silver pendant, such a beautiful, exquisite thing. Well, could not lowered creatures, like those that sometimes crawled into the orphanage, to choose a child such a piece of jewelry? Olivia cherished the pendant as the apple of her eye and even went to bed with it around her neck. One day, the girl found that the jewelry was gone. She was still in the 3rd grade and did not speak. What had hysterics through, a small, quiet girl, Olivia still remembered the despair that came over her at that moment. It seemed that along with the pendant, the hope for the future, for meeting her parents, for everything to be all right, was lost. Olivia was screaming, convulsing, unable to eat or drink. When her strength left her, she just sat in the corner, swaying and howling softly. One of the caregivers realized what was wrong. While the doctor and teachers were trying to cope with the little girl, the woman rushed to the gym, where Olivia had recently had a class, and found the pendant. It had fallen into a crevice between the mats. Seeing the jewelry, Olivia immediately smiled. The girl's tears dried on her face. A happy expression appeared. Olivia hugged the not indifferent kindergarten teacher tightly. The staff exhaled. The problem was solved. It was a pity that not all the staff of the orphanage were as attentive as that young teacher. During the years spent in the institution, Olivia had to endure a lot, insult and humiliation of adults, mockery of peers, and even beatings. The girl tolerated and waited for the moment when she would finally become free and independent. And now what Olivia had never even dreamed of, she had a daughter, her own child. For this she had to leave college. Olivia, you have to earn money and take care of the child. What is there to study? She will get education later. Now the main thing is her daughter, so beautiful, so defenseless. Next to her, Olivia felt very grown up and very strong. Ashley would have a real childhood, with birthdays, walks with her mother around the city, beautiful dresses, and her own shared toys. Olivia would do everything for that. And the young mom tried very hard. She worked hard and gave all her free time to her daughter. Ashley grew up a healthy and smart girl. She answered her mother with love and care. Already at the age of 7, Ashley learned to cook, and the girl knew how to clean since the middle group of kindergarten. The little girl saw how hard it was for her mother and tried to help her in everything, and she also studied well. Ashley did not need to force to do homework. 4s were rare guests in her diary. Adam never once took an interest in the child, but Olivia did not expect miracles. She no longer believed in them. Once she met the father of her daughter in the mall. He was walking in the arms of a pretty girl, smiling his trademark charming smile, looking fascinated companion in the eyes. How familiar was all this? Young Olivia had once lost her head at such behavior from Adam, and he had turned out to be a traitor and a coward. Probably, this pretty girl was going to be disappointed too. Olivia even felt a little sorry for her. Of course, the woman realized that there would come a moment when Ashley would ask her questions about her father, and she had no idea what to say to the child. She certainly didn't want to lie, and she didn't want to keep quiet either. Olivia knew exactly what it was like to live without knowing anything about her parents. Her daughter, of course, was luckier. She had a mother. But it was important to know about her father, Ashley, too. How complicated is this? Olivia hoped her daughter wouldn't be approaching her with a serious conversation anytime soon. Here was the office building finally reached. A security guard opened the door for Olivia. The man in his 40s always smiled and winked at the young cleaning lady when she came to work. The woman did not respond to these flirtations. So, there are enough problems and things to do. There is simply no time for romance, no desire either. The building, as always, greeted Olivia with silence and semi-darkness. The employees are probably just waking up and starting to get ready for work, and before they arrive, they have to wipe the floors in the corridors and offices. The equipment and uniform room was under the stairs. Olivia entered it, put on a robe, tucked her hair under her headscarf, looked at herself in the mirror. She is not yet 30, but what a tired look, and these dark circles under the eyes. Something must be done about it. Should I buy some face cream? On the neck glittered her favorite jewelry, the same silver key. Olivia still did not part with the pendant from the past. It became for her a kind of talisman. It seemed that the little key was a protection from all troubles and misfortunes. I wish I knew who had put it on her the first time. Would it remain a secret forever? Smiling at her reflection, the woman took a bucket and a mop and went to the top floor. She always started cleaning from the top. Sebastian sat in his office working on the next report that the accountant had brought him to sign. The figures were pleasing. His construction company was thriving. Profits were steadily increasing. The number of clients was growing. Things were going up, and that was fine. Sebastian, can I make you some coffee? Kathy's secretary, a nice girl, came into the office. The daughter of his former classmate could not find a job after college. Sebastian did not refuse. His friends and acquaintances often addressed him with such requests. He himself had very young children, but as young children, school children. Jordan was in the 8th grade. Nora was finishing the 5th. Wonderful, cute guys. Wife Adriana did not work after the birth of their first child. She devoted herself to her children, took them to developmental classes from an early age, and their heirs were also seriously involved in sports, their son in hockey and their daughter in rhythmic gymnastics. All this, of course, required a lot of investment, time, money, and effort. As for the financial side, Sebastian fully provided for the family from start to finish. Everything else was on Adriana's shoulders, and the results were impressive. From time to time, his wife invited Sebastian to competitions and tournaments where the children always demonstrated excellent results. The man was proud of Jordan and Nora and loved them and his young wife very much. Business, financial stability, a large, cozy house, a friendly family, smart and beautiful wife, always understands everything, no scandals, supports. It would seem, what else is needed for happiness? But Sebastian could not call himself happy. Lived in his soul pain, which will never go anywhere, and the man was well aware of it. Sebastian had once had a completely different life. Then he worked at the factory as a milling machine operator and was happy with a salary that was only slightly higher than the average for their provincial town. But the man at that time was very proud of himself and was happy and carefree. Sebastian could not afford, as he does now, an expensive saloon car or a vacation abroad. He paid the loan for an imported refrigerator and invited his wife to a restaurant, only on holidays. Not Adriana. Then Sebastian was married to a neighbor girl, Doris. But despite this, the man felt much happier than he did now, being a successful entrepreneur and father of 2 wonderful children. Kathy entered the office with a steaming cup of coffee, tall, slender, blonde, bright blue eyes, so similar to. No, better not to remember, too painful, too hard. Sebastian, so much time and money spent on a psychologist. It was a relief for a while, but then the pain and the memories came back. You just have to learn to live with it. Sometimes Sebastian managed to do it. There are so many things to do, so many daily worries and troubles. The firm requires a lot of time and attention. Children every day please with new successes. Loving, beautiful wife distracts with talks about the future. So nice to make plans and dreams together with her. In this whirlwind, heavy thoughts for a while retreated, but it was worth to stop for a while or to see something that reminded of those times, some insignificant detail, as the experienced nightmare came with a new force, like now. Kathy had just brought coffee, and in the midday sunlight, her beautiful blue eyes shone especially brightly. Sebastian immediately thought of other eyes, curious, loving, wide open, and just as blue. They were the eyes of his oldest daughter, his girl, who was now older than Kathy. The last time he saw her, she was 3 years old. Now Olivia is 29 years and 3 months old. Sebastian mentally set the candles on her birthday cake every year, and of course he knew exactly the age of his oldest daughter. That she was living somewhere now, perhaps under a different first and last name, the man had no doubt. The facts said otherwise, but the father felt Olivia was alive, except that finding her was unlikely. He had tried then, and years later too, but no trace of Olivia had ever been found. Guilt and irreparable loss became Sebastian's constant companions. His happiness after the incident was never complete. Sebastian could name the exact day when he last felt calm and relaxed. It was the date of Olivia's disappearance, Sunday, his day off. That day, Sebastian had decided to give Doris some rest. Olivia and I will go to the ponds, walk there, feed the swans, and you rest, because you complain about being tired all the time, said the caring husband, Doris. How great! Sincerely pleased wife. Such wonderful weather. Why should the girls stay at home all day? While you're away, I'll cook something delicious. So that's what it means for you to rest. Sebastian joked. His mood was high. He was proud of his new role as a young father and always enjoyed taking his daughter for walks. He liked to make her happy. And now, when the little girl is only 3 years old, it is so easy. Olivia is genuinely surprised by the most ordinary things and considers her daddy almost a magician, an unreal pleasant feeling. I'll have time to rest and make goodies, Doris replied. Especially cooking for my loved ones is a real pleasure. Sebastian hugged his wife. They had known each other since childhood. At Olivia's age, Sebastian and Doris, along with the other kids in their house, had been playing in the sandbox. Then they had been in the same class. Sebastian couldn't even remember life without Doris. She was always there, a kindred, understanding, and reliable person. And when Olivia came along, their family became truly happy. Sebastian remembered how he met his wife from the hospital. His family and friends were with him. Sebastian was holding a huge bouquet of roses, and for some reason he was very excited. Finally, Doris appeared on the doorstep with a tight bundle tied with a lush pink bow. Sebastian pulled back the corner of the blanket and stared in amazement at the little girl. The girl was sleeping soundly, with thick dark eyelashes like his own on her chubby cheeks. Sebastian had been jokingly reproached in his childhood for having long eyelashes, and some girl had not gotten such wealth, and now he saw the same ones on his daughter. There was another resemblance, a small mole above the upper lip. The man still remembered his feelings from the first meeting. He was rolled by a warm wave of love and tenderness. He wanted to become a reliable protector for this defenseless baby. Their daughter would be happy. He would give her everything she needed for a secure childhood. He would shelter her from the hardships of life, fill her every day with joy. Sebastian no longer remembered that he had once dreamed of a son. This girl, this sweet baby, in the blink of an eye became for him the center of the universe. The man could hardly hold back tears from his feelings, not enough to cry in front of everyone, but Doris, of course, realized what was happening to her husband. She looked at him and smiled. Later, when Jordan and then Nora were born, Sebastian felt nothing of the sort. Sure, he was happy to have a son and a daughter, but the feeling that the world had turned upside down, that didn't happen. Maybe because Sebastian was already an adult, an established man with a sad past? Or was the novelty effect missing, like when you meet your firstborn? Either way, Sebastian was much more relaxed about the birth of his youngest child than he was about Olivia. The man himself chose the name for his first daughter, Olivia. Doris did not object. She liked it too. The couple together took care of the newborn. With joy and amazement watched the development of the baby, proud of her successes. She was evolving. Sebastian shouted in delight when the daughter stood up in the crib for the first time by herself, on not yet firm legs, and how much joy there was from the first steps, complimentary feeding, another vaccination, a new hairstyle. Everything became a grand event for loving parents. And then Olivia spoke early. She was not even 1.5 years old. The realized word that said the girl was daddy. The father's pride and joy was unbounded. He was ready to tell everyone and everyone that his adored daughter now addresses him properly. Someone said that if the child said the first word daddy, then the next child would be a son. Sebastian, on the one hand, of course, dreamed of an heir, but on the other hand, it would have to share the attention, which now goes to his favorite daughter, with another child. No, perhaps it is too early. Let Olivia be the only princess in their family. The girl grew up fast. It's already been 3 years since Sebastian took her from the hospital. This third day of birth of his favorite child, the man remembered forever. After all, the next time he had already blown out the candles on Olivia's birthday cake, just mentally, 4 candles. Then guests came to their apartment, grandparents on both sides, brother Sebastian and his daughters, and sister Doris and her sons. It was noisy and fun. Olivia was so happy about the holiday and presents, hugging everyone in turn, laughing gleefully, playing with cousins and sisters, and Sebastian admired his princess, and once again amazed at how much she resembled himself as a child. And he was not the only one who noticed it. Olivia, of course, was everyone's favorite, and not even because of the fact that she was the youngest in a large family. It's just that there are such sincere, friendly children who create around themselves a special aura of joy, ease. Next to them, everyone seems better and kinder to themselves. Olivia was just such a girl, open, cheerful, trusting. A gift, not a child. Sometimes Sebastian, listening to the stories of colleagues and acquaintances about their children, envied himself. He was very lucky with his daughter, and with his wife too. The young man quite consciously enjoyed his happiness and mentally thanked fate for it, but everything changed on that sunny May day when Sebastian decided to take his daughter for a walk on the ponds. The ponds. It was, and still is, a gorgeous park not far from their town. Just one stop by train or half an hour by car, but Sebastian didn't have a car yet, so it was decided to travel by train. This park had everything for a wonderful vacation with children. Magnificent nature, attractions, numerous cafes with delicious ice cream, a couple of pizzerias, and of course, the ponds themselves, several large artificial ponds with swans, which their children and adults loved to feed. Doris had dressed her daughter that morning in a new comfortable tracksuit and made her a beautiful hairdo of small braids. The little girl looked like a doll, a modern doll and very fashionable. Sebastian liked to walk by the hand with a beautiful girl. People were looking at them. The man noticed it. Together they looked just wonderful, a young statuesque father and a charming daughter. The mood was wonderful. A couple of stops to the train station, father and daughter walked. It would have been possible to wait for the bus, but the weather was so wonderful that they did not want to shake in a stuffy, dusty, crowded cabin. At the train station, Sebastian bought a ticket for himself. Children under 7 did not have to pay the fare. It was 15 minutes before the train arrived. Father and daughter decided to walk around the local stores. In one of them, they bought themselves a hot dog and a glass of water. Very tasty. Olivia remarked with her mouth full. Yes, Sebastian agreed. But it's not good for you. But we won't get carried away. We can have a little. Having refreshed themselves, the man and the girl continued their shopping trip. Somewhere there was a stall with toys, Chinese consumer goods, but Olivia was happy every time with a new doll or a ball from this stall, so Sebastian looked for a familiar stall. He wanted to please the girl. Suddenly Olivia noticed a beautiful shiny sign, a costume jewelry store. Recently, the little girl realized her belonging to the female gender, loved her mother's cosmetics and jewelry. The girl recently used up her wife's favorite perfume, just poured a bottle of expensive perfume on her jacket, and she also begged her parents to pierce her ears to wear earrings like Lucy from kindergarten. The wife was going to take her daughter to this procedure next weekend. Of course, the young fashionista could not miss such an interesting store. Sebastian followed his daughter with a smile. Looking at the sparkling trinkets, Olivia oohed and ahed, which amused the saleswoman. I want this. She pointed her finger at a massive bracelet of brightly colored stones. No, the best is this. This time the girl's attention was attracted by an open-work tiara. Sebastian realized they couldn't leave here without buying it. But what would suit a little girl like Olivia? Not a ring with amber to give her. The saleswoman helped. She pulled out a box with small light pendants, silver-plated and gold-plated, with and without stones, and most importantly shapes, bears, hearts, ballerinas, just the thing for a child. Olivia greedily looked at all this splendor. At first her eyes were scattered, but then she confidently pulled out of the pile a key, thin, graceful, light. Sebastian noted to himself that his girl seemed to have good taste. Excellent choice. The saleswoman smiled. It's silver. I'll find you a lanyard to match it, so you can wear it around your neck. Olivia left the store happy. She thanked her father and the salesman 1,000 times. And now she was walking along the platform, and on her neck was a lanyard with a silver key. The girl carried herself like a real lady, and Sebastian marveled. Women seemed to have a love of jewelry in their blood, since such a tiny girl was happy with a silver pendant. Sebastian and Olivia had a wonderful time at the ponds, feeding the swans, riding the carousel, eating ice cream and pizza. Sociable Olivia, as always, made new friends and played with the children on the playground for hours. Time flew by. It was time to go home. The train was coming. Olivia reluctantly said goodbye to the girls and boys she had had so much fun with. Taking her father's hand, she obediently walked with him to the station. Among the crowd waiting, Sebastian immediately noticed them, 3 boys in their 20s. They behaved insolently and swaggeringly, swearing, not at all embarrassed by the presence of small children, and no one dared to reprimand them. It was more expensive. Sebastian also kept silent, better to stay away from such subjects, not enough to fight in front of Olivia. He can't let his daughter go through that kind of stress. So Sebastian prudently moved away from the suspicious company. Unfortunately, the trio turned out to be their neighbors on the carriage. In the train they behaved just as insolently and swaggeringly. The guys sat at the other end of the cabin and did not miss the opportunity to tease any of the passengers. People tried not to respond. They realized that this would be an excuse for more active and obviously unsafe actions on the part of the troublemakers. Sebastian looked thoughtfully at the fields and forests running past. The sun was beginning to set. Olivia was tired from the walk and the experience and had fallen asleep. She was so sweet, so defenseless. Sebastian smiled, looking at his daughter. He wasn't going to wake her up. When the train arrives at the station, the man will gently take her in his arms and carry her home, as he has done many times before. The girl is still so small, so light, just like a piece of fluff. Is it possible that one day this button will turn into a grown-up girl? Surely she will be a real beauty, with those blue eyes. If you want to smoke, you'll have to go out into the vestibule. While the daughter is asleep, you can take advantage of the situation. The man covered the girl with his jacket. At that moment, he could not think that he was doing it for the last time. It seemed to leave for only a couple of minutes. What could happen in this short period of time? The peaceful clatter of the wheels was soothing, bringing back memories of his own childhood, when he'd have traveled with his father on the train, just as Olivia was now. But only not for a walk in the park, but to the village to his grandparents, now his father himself. The door opened abruptly, and the same 3 guys who had been making noise on the platform and in the carriage came out into the vestibule. Sebastian tensed. Something told him that this was no accident. Nothing good could be expected. One of the guys asked for cigarettes. Sebastian didn't object and handed them 3. "Thank you." Exaggeratedly polite was the requester's reply. Apparently the leader, and even bowed gracefully. Sebastian nodded and was about to leave, but he was blocked by the oldest of the group, a man of about 30. "Wait," the leader asked. We have something to do with you. At the station we saw that you have a lot of money in your wallet, so why don't you share it with us? Sebastian realized that there was no way to avoid trouble now, so he gave them the money. But where's the guarantee they'll back off after that? And then, if he honored their request, his family would have nothing to live on for the rest of the month. Get into a fight? But the odds are stacked against him, and Olivia would be frightened. While the man was pondering, the ringleader decided for him. He gave Sebastian a fist in the jaw with a swing. The man's eyes flashed brightly, and he became dizzy. The man, not thinking about what he was doing, automatically retaliated. Sebastian boxed from the age of 10 to 16. The left hook was excellent. The attacker grabbed his head, staggered, almost fell, but the man was immediately attacked by two other scumbags. The blows came from all sides. Sebastian was hit in the head, kicked in the back, in the stomach. He couldn't stay on his feet, slumped down on the cold, dirty floor of the vestibule. He tried to cover his head with his hands, but the feet and fists of the hooligans still found a target. At some point, the man realized that he was passing out. There was a strange ringing in his ears, and his eyes went dark. Sebastian fell into a frightening but salutary blackness, where there was no pain or fear. He woke up in the hospital, opened his eyes, and immediately closed them again. The whiteness of the walls and furniture, coupled with the bright sunlight penetrating the room through the open window, was blinding and gave him a headache. He was in a hospital room, his whole body aching as if a train had recently run over him. Or maybe it had. The last thing the man remembered was a hail of blows from all sides and pain, unbearable pain. What had happened to him? How did he end up here? A nurse entered the room, rolling an IV in front of her. Noticing that the patient woke up, the girl smiled warmly. You did well, you made it. And you came in a very serious condition. No one gave a prognosis. What? What happened to me? Sebastian was surprised at how weak his own voice sounded. It hurt to move his lips for some reason. You were attacked in the vestibule, beaten and robbed, then thrown off the train at full speed. It's a miracle you survived. And your daughter? I had a little girl with me, my daughter. Anxiety suddenly squeezed Sebastian's heart with an icy hand. The pain and horror of what had happened receded. All this suddenly seemed unimportant. The main thing was to find out where Olivia was now. The daughter? The nurse lowered her eyes. You will talk to your wife about it later. Now you should rest and gain strength. The injuries are serious and... Call your wife. Sebastian demanded. He had to know Olivia's fate at all costs. I'll call her and let her know you're awake. The nurse promised. Visiting hours are from 4 to 7. She'll be there for sure. No visitors are allowed in the ICU, but the head doctor will make an exception for you. Why? Well, your case is special. The nurse answered evasively. Sebastian barely waited for Doris to arrive, while he was tormented by uncertainty and speculation. Olivia woke up, didn't see her father, must have cried, attracted the attention of the conductor. She, of course, took her to the police. They found Doris, and she took the girl away. Oh, his little girl was scared. It's all his fault. Why did he leave the girl alone? Couldn't he have waited till he got home? The man was overcome with questions. Why didn't the nurse tell him his daughter was all right? And what did that mean, a special case? The nurse said his wife would only be allowed to see him because it was a special case. What does that mean? Doris burst into the room at 4 o'clock sharp. Pale, thin, with shot hair, not at all like his calm and always well-groomed wife. The young woman seemed to have aged dramatically. Deep shadows lingered under her eyes. Her features were sharpened, and her eyes, They were alien and frightening, with despair and terror frozen in them. "Where is Olivia?" Sebastian was the first to ask, struggling to rise on his elbow. Looking at his wife, he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "She's gone." Tears rolled from Doris' eyes. "She's gone, she's gone. Do you understand? You've come to your senses. That's good, because now you can remember some details that will help you find her." "Missing how?" Sebastian's voice trailed off into a falsetto. The realization of what had happened came over him in heavy waves, making him dizzy. Everything that was happening was like a horror movie or a dream, a nightmare. "Our daughter disappeared without a trace. The police are looking for her, interviewing witnesses, but so far, no leads. The men who beat you up have been found. They're in jail. They're investigating you, but they had nothing to do with Olivia's disappearance. We know that for a fact. Sebastian had only himself to blame for everything that happened. Why had he gone to the ponds with his daughter that day? How could he leave her alone even for a minute? Why hadn't he avoided a fight with 3 scumbags for her sake? The physical wounds healed relatively quickly, but the mental wounds did not. After what had happened, Sebastian was no longer the same person. The weight of guilt pressed down on him with an unbearable weight. The police searched for Olivia. The whole city and neighboring stations along the train route, several months were pasted with photos of the girl. There were witnesses who saw a similar little girl in the company of 2 dirty, ragged women. They asked for alms in the crossing, but this thread led nowhere. Sebastian and Doris lived in anxious anticipation, the unknown depressing. The wife did not accuse Sebastian directly, but she did not object when the man called himself names for leaving the child alone. At the time, Sebastian wished he had a time machine, wishing he could go back to the fateful evening. He would hold Olivia's hand, would not let go for a second. The man couldn't even look at the cigarettes now. The couple shuddered with each call. They gave hope and fear. What if now they would tell them that everything was over, that nothing could be fixed? Time passed, the investigation did not move. Olivia was considered missing. The unknown is exhausting mentally and physically. Sebastian could not sleep, and if he forgot to sleep, he had nightmares. The same happened to Doris. After about a year, my wife couldn't take it anymore, packed her things and went to her parents. "I can't be in this apartment. It's too hard, with her things and you here." Doris explained. Sebastian didn't try to hold her back. He realized that she blamed him for what had happened to her daughter, and he agreed with her. Who else was to blame but him? Sebastian was left alone, in an empty apartment, once so cozy and warm. Nothing brought relief, neither walking 20 kilometers a day, nor immersing himself in work. Sebastian couldn't eat, he couldn't eat. Immediately I thought, I'm sitting here in the bright kitchen, in front of a plate of pasta, and where is Olivia now? What is she eating? How is she feeling? Sebastian began to doubt that his daughter was alive after 3 years of fruitless searching. By then, he had become a shadow of himself. The man knew from mutual acquaintances that Doris had been hospitalized, unable to withstand the strain. He felt that he himself was close to the same. Salvation came unexpectedly. One day a neighbor from the 2nd floor, a marginal man about 40 years old, came to the fire with a bottle of cheap booze. Sebastian found a snack. The feeling dulled. The world shone with new colors. The man for the first time in several years experienced something like relief. However, the morning despair and guilt came with a new force. This was joined by a hard hangover, but Sebastian already knew what to do. So the man became addicted to the bottle. He soon lost his job. And understandably, who needs such an employee? But Sebastian didn't worry about it. The house was full of things that quickly found buyers: appliances, furniture, outerwear. The man had taken almost everything out of the apartment. Only Olivia's belongings had not been touched. In rare moments, the man realized how worthless his life was now. Why is he even needed in the world? He's a little over 30, and he doesn't want to live at all anymore. He has nothing bright and good anymore and will not have it. Sebastian has seriously decided that he doesn't want to stay in this world any longer. This was the only way he could end his suffering once and for all, by making a final decision. The man felt calm and even relieved. Soon it would all stop. One morning, tormented by a hangover, he was walking to a local bar. Suddenly, Sebastian's attention was attracted by a strange procession. A woman in a white robe was walking along the sidewalk. She was carrying a stroller in which sat a baby boy of about 3 years old, the same one Olivia had been in when she disappeared. Clinging to the stroller on either side were another boy and a girl. The pair of crumbs stomped obediently alongside, all of the children dressed in identical costumes. They were very different from the usual babies, not making noise, not trying to scatter, not laughing. The children looked beyond serious and sad. Sebastian, who, as it seemed to him, had long ago become callous to other people's misfortune, his heart sank at the sight of this picture. He realized that he had met the abandoned babies from the nearest orphanage. The weather had warmed up outside, and the teacher took the children for a walk outside the gate. The man stared in amazement at the departing company. The teacher looked like a chicken surrounded by little chickens, defenseless, abandoned, and in need of no one. The life of these crumbs had just begun, and they had already faced such a misfortune, ended up in an orphanage. What is waiting for them in this world? Who will help them? Who will support them? Sebastian remembered how much love and care their Olivia had received. That warmth was vital to the babies. Sebastian suddenly realized that it was too early for him to say goodbye to this world. After all, he may still be useful to someone, to make someone's fate easier and happier. There are so many weak people around, needing protection, and he is a healthy, strong man with a working profession in his hands and brains, and such a man can roll mountains if he wants to. No more wasting potential on booze and heavy thoughts. Sebastian is determined to change his life. His daughter is irretrievably lost. It is his fault, but now he has a new goal: to become strong, rich, influential, and make the lives of children who need help better and more pleasant. The man gave up drinking. It turned out to be surprisingly easy. He got a job at the factory again, worked for 3, saved money, gained experience, and after a couple of years, opened his first firm for repair and construction. Employees recruited from his own colleagues, money for materials, and the most necessary equipment he had set aside. So began his journey in business. He had to learn, reorganize, solve problems arising at every step. But everything worked out. The firm grew and strengthened. Soon we had to open a branch, then the next. At first, the office served as an apartment Sebastian, but after some time it became clear it is time to rent a separate building, because the turnover of the company grew by the hour, not by the day. The number of clients and staff increased at the same pace. Sebastian had money. Being a factory worker, the man thought he was earning quite well, but now he had completely different opportunities. Sebastian could easily buy an expensive foreign car in a car dealership, go to the warm sea at any time of the year, afford a large house, and all at once. But the man was in no hurry to please himself with these benefits. He continued to live in his old apartment and drove a budget car. Sebastian spent most of his earnings on business development to have even more income in the future, and every month he spent a lot of money on orphanages and hospitals, transferred money to funds to help sick children, and he also made monthly transfers to Doris's card. She developed a nervous disease that required expensive treatment. The man disguised his help. Doris thought she was receiving benefits from the state. Sebastian was not sure that his ex-wife would accept money from him. By the way, Doris remarried to a lowly library employee, a guy much younger than herself. They had a son. It would seem that the woman's life was getting better, which Sebastian was very happy. But the disease did not recede. The man knew from mutual acquaintances. Someone did not understand the successful businessman, considered him abnormal. It's a joke. Such sums of money regularly spent, it is unclear on what, but most people around Sebastian respected him for his generosity and kindness. Of course, around a wealthy and successful man led a lot of hunters for his heart. Beauties of different ages sought to get the favor of a talented businessman, even quite young and handsome at the same time, but Sebastian remained indifferent to the admirers. It seemed that in his life there is only work and help people who need it. Years went by. Sebastian's company became one of the most successful in the city. The man's name appeared on the list of the richest men in the state, and now he lived in a country house. He liked this area, quiet, calm, no one noises under the windows, and no one working with a drill from morning to night. The man often visited the orphanages, played with the kids, assessed the situation, learned about the needs of the orphanages. Sebastian looked closely at the faces of abandoned children, especially girls who looked like Olivia. What if his daughter had been raised in a similar place? Sebastian realized, of course, that even if she was, Olivia was already an adult. He would not find her here. On one such trip, Sebastian met an incredible girl. Adriana had been volunteering since she was a teenager, first in animal shelters and then in orphanages. The staff praised the responsible student. From the words of the staff, Sebastian realized that the girl spends every free minute in the orphanage, plays with the kids, comes up with interesting developmental activities for them, and even does the most difficult work, which often causes squeamishness in older people, caring for children who cannot walk. Such indifference is rare among today's youth. Summarized the director of the orphanage. I don't know what we would do without Adriana. We are very short of hands. She is our lifesaver. Sebastian wanted to talk to the selfless girl. She was very pretty, tall, swarthy, with big brown eyes in which shone pity and kindness. An unusual and very appealing combination. The girl was in graduate school at the Faculty of Foreign Languages, preparing to get a degree. She needed languages to work for an international volunteer organization, and a degree would allow her to teach and convince students to help those in need. While Adriana's peers dreamed of a successful marriage, she herself dreamed of working with starving African children. Adriana was a young woman, only 6 or 7 years older than Olivia, but Sebastian felt a kindred spirit in her, just as he did. The girl could not pass by another's misfortune. She did not leave indifferent, helpless children in need of support. Adriana turned out to be a very interesting conversationalist. She knew a lot about many things. Her judgments were deep and wise beyond her years. Sebastian caught every word of his new acquaintance. She also enjoyed talking to him, and it was very noticeable. One day, Sebastian realized that he had fallen in love. He had never imagined that after everything that had happened to him, such a thing could happen. The man fell asleep and woke up with thoughts of Adriana, with impatience and even inner trepidation, waiting for meetings with her. Sebastian tried to hide his feelings. He is much older, and even with such a weight of guilt on his shoulders. Why would a fresh young girl need all this? She has so many plans, so many aspirations. Yet the man felt that she cared for him too. Adriana was the first to confess her love. They were just helping to unload a car with boxes of baby food for the children of the orphanage. The purchase was paid for by Sebastian. It so happened that in the kitchen, where the director asked them to take the boxes, they were all alone. I couldn't hide it any longer. Adriana suddenly made up her mind. She looked into Sebastian's eyes. You. Anyway, I think I love you and I don't know what to do with all this now. It's unexpected and very pleasant. Sebastian smiled. The girl's words made a strong impression on him, and the man was even confused. The last time this had happened to him had been a long time ago. I know exactly what it looks like. Adriana continued, lowering her eyes. Another girl trying to seduce a rich man. You what? Sebastian gently took her palms in his hands. Could you even let me think that? Couldn't I? My friend, when I told her what I thought exactly that, and she complimented me on my wisdom. So this friend doesn't know you at all. Sebastian was glad to be able to finally tell Adriana how he felt. You're the most incredible person I've ever met. Smart, kind, caring, sincere. Me too. I also can't believe that there are people like you. The girl exclaimed. Me, I'm far from perfect, but I love you. For a long time now, I didn't want to tell you, not to worry you, but it turns out it's mutual and I'm happy. Adriana and Sebastian started dating. They continued to help orphanages, even traveling to a neighboring state. Every day, Sebastian felt that Adriana was becoming closer and closer to him. The man did not delay with the proposal. The girl happily responded with consent. Of course, there were different rumors about them. Then Sebastian accused of infatuation with a young beauty. Then Adriana called Adriana Hunter for millionaires and kept. The spouses cared little. Both enjoyed their newfound happiness, but the trip to poor African countries, which was planned by Adriana, had to be canceled. Soon it turned out that she was pregnant. Sebastian, of course, was happy to know that he would soon become a father, but at the same time he was awakened in fears that had been dormant. Would he be able to protect this child? What if the story with Olivia happened again? Of course, Adriana knew what had happened to her husband's first daughter. The spouses were frank with each other and tried to live without secrets and secrets. The woman supported and comforted her beloved as much as she could. Jordan was born, and a few years later Nora was born. Adriana decided to devote herself to her children. Her career as an interpreter and volunteer work took a back seat. Sebastian marveled at what his son and daughter had accomplished in their younger years. He realized that it was all thanks to Adriana's efforts and patience. The plan was to take a baby, and maybe more than one, from the orphanage. When would Nora and Jordan grow up? After becoming a mother, Adriana realized how little care and warmth orphanage babies receive from volunteers, educators, and other helpers. She had a new idea to give at least a few people from the state institution a full-fledged happy childhood. Sebastian was in solidarity with his wife. Thoughts of Olivia were still going through his mind every day. She was already a grown woman. Where is his daughter now? How is she doing? After becoming a wealthy businessman, Sebastian tried again to find Olivia. When you're rich, you have a whole new set of opportunities. The man hired private investigators, but it was fruitless. Too much time had passed since the child had gone missing, and no leads had been found by the skilled detectives. That day, Sebastian arrived at the office early. He had to finish a few reports before the workday started. The man did not like to stay in the office late. He worked better in the morning, so he left a pile of papers on the desk yesterday. The guard said a polite hello to the chief. He nodded and went to the stairs. There were distinctive rustles from upstairs. The cleaning lady was scrubbing the floor on the second floor. There was a peculiar odor of detergent in the air. Sebastian was blocked by a bucket. He tried to go around it. The cleaning lady noticed it. A young woman with a tired face, strands of blonde hair poking out from under her headscarf. She hurriedly moved the bucket aside so that the boss could pass more comfortably. Sebastian was used to such subservience. Something about this woman interested him. So young, pretty, smart, open face. Couldn't she find a better job? Strange, of course. Careful, the floor is slippery. The cleaning lady said, in a slightly guilty tone. I didn't have time to mop it dry. I thought it wouldn't be long before there were people here. That's all right, Sebastian smiled. And then his gaze focused on a familiar thing from the distant past. On the cleaning lady's chest hung a silver chain with a pendant in the form of a dainty key. It was the piece of jewelry Sebastian had bought on that terrible day when his daughter had disappeared. The man stared at the pendant, and the cleaning lady felt awkward. The woman stood there, not knowing what to do, whether to continue scrubbing the floors or whether the conversation with her boss was not over yet. Sebastian looked closely at the woman's face, big blue eyes, a mole above her lip the same as his. Really? It just can't be? What is your name? The man asked in a husky voice. Olivia. Olivia. My questions will seem strange to you now, Sebastian warned, but it's really important that I know. Is your father's name Ethan? From his middle name. I don't know my father's name. The woman stared at the chief with wide, surprised eyes. Ethan is the name of the policeman who found me at the train station. That's why the orphanage gave me that middle name. His last name, by the way. Her facial expressions, her movements, her voice, everything was so familiar, but Sebastian was afraid to believe in this unexpected happiness, lest he be disappointed. He invited Olivia to his office, where their conversation continued in a more appropriate setting. Sebastian discovered that Olivia had been found at the age of 3 at a train station in a town hundreds of kilometers away. The girl herself remembered little from the stress she'd been under. At least she gave her name, but that was it. Adults tried to find out more about the family and the fate of the child, but they failed. From the stories of eyewitnesses and fragmentary memories of the girl herself, formed more or less plausible version. Olivia was born in a marginalized family. Relatives drove the girl to different cities and earned by asking for alms, and then the little girl grew up. She no longer caused the former pity of passers-by, and adults, for lack of need, left her at the station. And this jewelry... Sebastian pointed his finger at the pendant. Where did you get it from? Do you remember? I think it was given to me by one of my parents. I had it on me when they found me at the train station. I always thought it was strange that someone loved me once. You don't give such beautiful things to children you don't care about, do you? Olivia. Sebastian finally decided to voice his speculation. I must tell you my complicated story. Listen and you'll understand why I'm acting so strangely. And Sebastian told the woman in the chair across from him the story of his lost daughter. Olivia grew paler and paler as he told the story, nervously rubbing the pendant around her neck or a strand of hair that had fallen out from under her headscarf. I think I'm even sure that you are my daughter. Finally, the man finished. I want to believe it so badly. Tears came to Olivia's eyes. But I'm afraid of being wrong, and I'm afraid of being disappointed. We could do a DNA test to be sure, but I don't need one. Sebastian's voice was trembling. He wanted to hug Olivia tightly, but he did not know how his daughter would react to it. After all, She did not know him at all and did not believe in what had happened to the end. Of course, the analysis confirmed the parentage. Olivia and Sebastian felt it even without the laboratory tests, but this way they had proof. Sebastian felt incredibly relieved. Life was bright again. The man had already forgotten what it was like. The weight that had been weighing on him all these years was finally off his shoulders. There was Olivia, his wonderful, beautiful daughter. What's more, he's already a grandfather with a granddaughter, Ashley. It was an amazing feeling. His daughter had had a hard time in life. Listening to her stories, Sebastian felt despair that he could not protect her then from all these hardships. But now everything would be different. Olivia would no longer have to suffer. He would still be for her, and for her granddaughter, a reliable protection and support. With Olivia and the certified DNA test result, Sebastian arrived at Dora's house. She was crying, laughing, hugging her daughter. Olivia seemed to remember her mom. She snuggled up to her and cried too. Doris was visibly on the mend after the arrival of her daughter. Sebastian arranged for Olivia to join his company as an assistant manager. He created a position specifically for his daughter. She had to sort documents, keep track of the schedule of events, something like a secretary. At the same time Olivia was studying at the university by correspondence. The life of a woman before meeting her father was difficult. She did not get an education. Now she was making up for lost time. She liked her studies very much. Olivia and her daughter now lived in her father's mansion. Ashley quickly became friends with Jordan and Nora. The children had fun, and their laughter never ceased. Adriana accepted Olivia and Ashley like family. She was happy that her beloved husband was no longer tormented by guilt. At first, Sebastian was afraid to go to sleep. It seemed that he would wake up and find that the meeting with Olivia was just a dream. He could not believe that there were such coincidences, and there were many coincidences in history. Olivia had gotten a job at his company, not some other company. Sebastian arrived at the office earlier than usual and noticed the pendant around the cleaning lady's neck. Incidentally, the daughter could have lost the jewelry 100 times over the years, but she kept it and, moreover, wore the key around her neck at all times. Without the pendant, Sebastian would hardly recognize Olivia as an employee. There's no such thing as coincidence. Adriana replied to her husband when he shared his thoughts with her. It's all a chain of regularities. Everything happened the way it was supposed to.